Hello everybody and welcome to Encounter Roleplay. My name is Will, I'm a D&D sex icon. I'm back here today with the first episode of the official Midgard live stream, The World's Tree Burns. Welcome everybody, great to see so many people here. Let's not waste any time and let's go around the cast and crew and let's figure out who we are and who we're going to be playing today. And let's start with our esteemed Dungeon Master tonight, Dan Dillon. Dan, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm really excited to be here. So, as you said, I'm going to be the Dungeon Master, and so I'm going to be playing everything and everyone that is not you guys. My condolences, and good luck.
Thank you so much. We also have with us Tool Squall. Tool Squall, how you doing, my friend?
I am just excited as heck to be here. Cannot wait to play in Midgard. This is one of my favorite settings. I've used a lot of their stuff from Kobold Press in my campaigns, and I am playing Glaz, who is our Tolkien wizard, Geomancer, once we get a little further along. So we shall see how this rolls for us.
Great stuff. Thank you, Tool Squall. We also have Laura Lania Buck with us tonight. Laura, how you doing?
Good. Had a lot of fun on Long March just now. It's been impossible to contain the hype for this. I'm really excited to be bringing to life Kari, the Shadow Fae of the Cat Domain. And this is my first time inside of Midgard, but I've already found it a really lore-rich place, and I'm excited to dive on in.
Great stuff. And we also have with us McLoken. How you doing, my friend?
That's me. Hi, everyone. I'm McLoken. I'm super excited about today because all these people are fabulous. Thank you for having me on this show. And it's my birthday, so best way to celebrate my birthday, playing fucking D&D.
Play some D&D. Happy birthday, man.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Great stuff. And last but not least, we have our very own Encounter Josh with us tonight. How you doing, my friend?
I am good. I am hyped. We have all been chatting and causing an absolute shitstorm about this and just going on and on. Discord servers have been created, like the hype is real. So I am looking forward to shrugging into the well-worn boots of Kane, who is a Dampier Ranger who is sort of lost in the world as is and is looking to maybe find a party worth traveling with again.
Great stuff. As for my own part, I will be playing Riodan, similarly a Dampier, but he is a cleric of the Hunger Domain, and he's going to be casting a lot of fun blood magic today. He's a little younger than Kane, a little bit more exuberant in his newfound powers, so it's going to be a fun dynamic with this party. Before we get started, I'll remind you guys that we are sponsored by Kobold Press. That's why we're running the show here. That's why we're all here having such a great time. We strongly recommend you go check out Kobold Press in the Midgard, saying we're all these books. Look at all of the beautiful D&D5E books, the World Book, the Hero's Handbook like we're using today. It's some great stuff. The players have been devouring this content over the past couple of weeks since we've been setting up this show. And on display are a lot of the classes and backgrounds and races that come with the Hero's Handbook. So you'll be getting a full display of the materials that you'll be able to find there. You can go to Kobold Press, their website, in order to check out that stuff. Of course, we're also sponsored by Fantasy Grounds, and we'll be using the Midgard official material within Fantasy Grounds as well, which are our virtual tabletop of choice. So all of the dice rolls and the maps and tokens and images will be using Fantasy Grounds. And of course, you can check out Wayland Games for all of your miniature needs as well. You guys can interact with today's show. That's the fun thing about Encounter Roleplay. You guys can interact with our story, engage, and have fun alongside us. If you haven't yet followed the show, make sure you do, because when we hit our next follower goal, you guys are going to get a twist of fate in what we call viewer decisions, and you guys can interact with the story. Dan, our Dungeon Master, will ask you a question. You guys will provide answers, and then through democracy, we vote on them, and then whatever you guys vote on has to happen in our game. Also, you guys can check out this tweet in case you want to rewatch that trailer one more time. Here is the tweet for you guys, and at 20 retweets we'll have another viewer decision. And don't forget that you can in fact donate to affect the game as well. Give players nat 1s, nat 20s, wild magic surges, and worse. And as per request of chat, I will stop talking now and we'll start playing some Dungeons and Dragons. So I'll hand over to our illustrious Dungeon Master Dan to take us into The World Tree Burns.
Fantastic. All right, so let's just jump right into it then, shall we? Welcome to the world of Midgard. It's a world of dark fantasy and deep magic, where the gods meddle in the affairs of mortals, hidden behind masks to protect their secrets and to keep their enemies and sometimes even their worshippers guessing. It's a world slipping ever closer into darkness. Ancient horrors stir as they sleepwalk through the western wastes. Ley lines pulse and surge with erratic flows of power, and long thought defeated evil stirs and moves in the shadows. At the heart of central Midgard is the Crossroads region, and there in the center of that is the free city of Zobek. Liberated from its oppressive rule about 100 years prior, it is a cosmopolitan place where humans and dwarves rub elbows with kobolds, once lowly slaves, now freed peoples, though they live, work, and sometimes struggle against the odds, even here. They even move and live alongside the Gearforged, the enigmatic beings of clockwork and arcane energy fused together. Yes, there it is. There's our Gearforged. They are constructed bodies that house the souls of once living creatures. And so the Crossroads comes to a nexus point in the free city of Zobek, and there are wide cobbled avenues, and two rivers converge, bringing trade and news from all over Midgard. And as we look over the districts, the temple districts, the market ward, we dive into the streets themselves, and then below them into the long abandoned tunnels, which were once a mixture of the basements of dwellings, utility tunnels, even kobold mines that are now long abandoned since their enslavement ended. These are known as the cartways. If you wish to lose yourself, if you wish to find someone that doesn't want to be found, the cartways is probably your best bet. Smugglers, knaves, brigands of all sorts call it home and use it as their stock and trade in getting in and out of Zobek and places they shouldn't be. And there we find ourselves, our heroes, working, adventuring together for some time now. They have been hired to locate lost articles hidden, taken somewhere, and they have tracked them here to the cartways. You find yourselves having defeated a pack of brigands, lowly cut purses, hired from the local gangs, probably just muscle, picked up for some rude coin by whatever enemy it is you now pursue. You've left them bleeding and battered behind you in the dark tunnels, and you have found an iron door, ancient, rusted, nearly falling off of its hinges. And your tracker's skills have followed your quarry and their trails through the tunnels to this point. You know that it lies beyond. So an iron door stands before you.
Okay. So for my own sanity, I'm going to need some character description. So I've got the artwork, which is amazing. So I'll go first. So Riordan,
describe yourself, what you're doing.
He would look to be about 20, 22 years old, quite a young, fresh-faced looking boy. He wears the finery of a noble, of a courtier, and the only visible weaponry on him would be a small dagger, which is clasped on his side. His hair is actually worn backwards, and he is probably smiling. He likes to smile, and he has something of an enigmatic draw towards him in a darkly charismatic way. And he is, at the moment, probably wondering which one of his party members, which one of his flock, as he would see them, is going to go and open that door for him.
Quick question there, Will. Does I may have missed it. Does Riordan have visible armor of any kind?
He would be wearing a basic adventuring kit, and there's probably some levers underneath his person, but he doesn't wear any kind of heavy plate armor or anything, which is
okay.
Really
so he's lightly armored at this point, something easily concealed and easy to move in.
That's right. Yeah.
Got it. All right. So Riordan sort of casts his what color are his eyes?
His eyes are
what
green.
What color are Riordan's eyes? Green?
Yeah, greeny blue, yeah.
All right, so he casts his bright gaze around the gloomy tunnel, and unless you guys brought light with you, it is actually pitch black, and you're all relying on your natural proclivity to navigate and see in the dark. And he just sort of casts an expectant look over at the rest of his flock.
My green eyes would kind of come to meet him. Cat's eyes in the dark. It has that kind of reflection to it. And Kari would just kind of look back at him, usually being more one of the quiet members of the group. I'm going to go ahead with my character description. She has 2 small horns that are black where cat ears would protrude, and she is a shadow fae, so she is kind of like a cross between a tiefling and a dark elf if you've never seen one. She has scintillating black and purple skin with pearl blonde, purple hair. It's usually tied back with a dark purple bow and a thin dagger kind of hidden almost ornamentally within her hair. She has a slender nose and an oval-shaped face. She stands at 5'5", and she's about 115 pounds. She kind of sways when she's standing still, too, almost kind of like how a cat's tail would flick back and forth. But she doesn't make any move towards the iron door.
I would say somewhat hovering, this sort of looming shadow above Kari is Glaz, who is a trollkin. So he is almost 7 feet tall. He is actually he is a Stonehide trollkin, so he is fairly heavily built, but it doesn't look like he necessarily works out. He just sort of has a naturally large build to him in his musculature. His skin is sort of darker in tone, almost like weathered old leather. And on his shoulders, around his face, there are sort of these rocky, almost plate-like protrusions. They're actually just hardened skin that are the colors of carnelians, sort of that orangey, glowing color to them. He is only wearing, he's wearing sort of a sleeveless tunic, and he has this big, large skin thrown over one shoulder that's attached all the way down to his belt. It's almost like a cape. It's so long. And on it, you can see sort of a silver and gold tattooing that is on this large hide that he wears over that is a map of Midgard. And you would see different lines running through it that represent some of the ley lines that he has been studying. He wears sort of a kilt with sort of leggings underneath of it and large boots. He has a pair of wired ring glasses that he sort of takes off and sort of cleans them off and looks and goes, so what is our next plan here? That was interesting back there, yes? And now the door, I can try, but it will not be quiet if you'd like me to give it a shot. And sort of looks to his other companions.
And I think at that point you would see like Cloak down by like your knees, like with his arms crossed, like looking at the door, and then looking up at Glaz and be like, "Yeah, I don't think quiet's our strong suit right now." And then what you see, all you guys see, is a little gnomish man about 3'4", with a red cloak on, with a hood brought up, and you see just a bunch of foliage, like moss and like different things, and then you see like there's like mushrooms, other things growing from it, and all you see is like a mask, and like with the dark vision you see like the outline of the mask, and then you see like the 2 beams of light that you normally would see looking at someone with dark vision, just peering through, and looks creepy as all hell, but he's just like looking at all of you, and you can tell he has kind of like a little bit jovial smile to you. And looks around at everyone to see if anyone's going to attempt to open the door or if he has to try it.
Which brings us to last but far from least.
Sat quietly, sort of on his haunches, very carefully, with his blade, which is a single saber. It's you are familiar with blades based on a Chinese Dao sword, which is balanced across his knees, and he's crouched low, looking quite filthy and bedraggled. His hair is matted and dark. He is wearing dark clothing that is stained, and his leather armor is beaten from hard use. Across his back is a bow, and he has a small quiver of dark stained arrows hanging across his back. His companion, who he usually travels with, was reluctant to come down into such a dark and subterranean place, so he finds himself slightly agitated and hasn't taken part in the conversation, but he's also agitated by the delay and finally noticing how everyone is loitering and trying to decide who's going to open the door. With a flick of his wrist and with agility that beguiles his Dampier nature, he flicks up his blade into his hand and strides forward very quietly to test this door.
All right, so you're just going to try and carefully check it, see if it's going to swing open at your touch or not?
Indeed.
Before he does that, can I have my familiar present? I forgot to include her in my description, and I don't want you to think that I didn't have her.
No, that's fine.
Sorry.
You could have already conjured your familiar, and she can either prowl up on you now, or you can summon her from the pocket where you banish her to sometimes for safety.
She can just kind of appear.
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, since you had said we'd already been in combat, can I go ahead and mark off that I would have cast mage armor?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, pretty standard practice, but just so that I'll go ahead and burn the spell slot and say that I cast it.
Varus is a tiny little, not quite full cat, not quite kitten, and has the same kind of gleaming fell green eyes that Kari does.
And this cat behaves a little strangely. It's a black cat, sleek black fur, except it isn't shiny. In fact, light seems to just sort of slide off of it, like oil and water. And as it slinks around her legs, you actually lose sight of the damn thing every now and then. It's almost like it blends into the cloying darkness around, even in your dark vision. And so, Kane strides forward on deceptively soft booted footfalls and kind of nudges the door. Kane, it looks like it's probably going to open, but if you're not careful, it's going to be loud. The hinges are rusted. The door is heavy.
Do be careful, darling.
I love it.
He gives you a cold look in response to your familiar tone, and gestures for the rest of the party without a word to ready up. And he has his sword sort of angled to impale anything that would emerge aggressively, and will very carefully
Never careful.
sneak open the door as quietly as he can.
All right, why don't you go ahead and make me a dexterity stealth check?
The first roll, I'm so nervous. A dexterity stealth check. Okay, let me just check my...
We're going to make this one with disadvantage because of the horrible age and rust of this iron door.
You terrible... How could you do this to me?
Yes.
First roll, and you're making me roll with disadvantage. Okay.
Yes, curse my name. Do it.
Oh, that's an 8.
Ooh, an 8. Interesting. All right, so as he presses the door open, there's just this... It's not super loud, but it just grates along your spine like a rusty blade on bone. This that echoes, seeming amplified in these close stone hallways. But, it could have been louder. At least he didn't kick it in, right? So the door opens, and your vision resolves the chamber beyond. It looks like it's difficult to tell what it was at one point. It was certainly used for something. There's old rotten bits of wood and rubble sort of scattered around the room. It's perhaps 30 foot square and has a taller ceiling than the 10-foot tunnels you've been in. It rises up to about 20 feet with a sort of vaulted stonework. And there are columns every few feet, stone columns stacked high supporting the ceilings along each side of the room. And you can see at the far side there's another open doorway. It looks like once there was another iron door there, but it has since just rusted away to nothing.
Do you want to go open that one, Natalie, too?
You're very good at opening these doors, darling.
Slightly,
come on.
like his hackles rise ever so slightly, and he's going to cautiously move in, checking any hiding places in the room, paying absolutely no attention to the idiots that he is traveling with.
All right. So is anyone's passive perception lower than 10?
No.
No? All right. Then none of you are surprised as you move into the room in your formation as figures begin to stir from behind the columns and behind the piles of rubble. The individuals emerging are crouched low, and they are carrying wickedly curved thin blades, and they're dressed in black robes with tattered hems, and they have strange markings inked on their faces and backs of their hands and their arms. Not tattoos, though. It just looks like actually just smeared on with ink, and they've since begun to run with either sweat or rain or moisture from the tunnels. And with a great cry that echoes throughout the room, they attack. Roll initiative.
Oof.
0.
Oh,
Here we go.
yeah.
Oh boy.
Right. Oh, I'm the noob here, so how do I roll? There we go. I got it. I did it!
Yep, there you go.
Here we go. Ah!
So
Okay.
16 for me.
All right.
Oh, how do
so
you add pluses? Oh, that's...
Is it?
Oh,
14 for Glaz.
I got an 8. I just didn't realize I could take dice from the character sheet. I did it from the little bar at the bottom.
okay, so I think some of you have your characters programmed in, others didn't. Some people just rolled dice. So we're just gonna do this sort of the old-fashioned way until if we get this all programmed in. So we'll go anybody over 20. Nope, 20 to 15.
I got a 16.
16. Ryodan. 15 to 10.
14
I
for
got a
Glaz.
14.
15 for Kari. Is that correct?
14 for Kari. And
And
Glass.
14 for Glaz as well.
Yes.
All right, who would like to go first?
I'll let Kari go first.
Very well.
And this is a good time to mention that electricity begins to crackle visibly along my weapons during combat as per one of our wild magic surges.
Oh,
Very nice.
interesting.
I am going to cast the True Strike cantrip.
Well, hang on. We're not quite to the actions yet.
Okay.
So it was sorry. Let's see. 15 to 10. 10
You
to
said
5.
ask me what I wanted to do, and I'm like, I'm good to go. Let's go.
10 to 5.
I got an 8.
You got an 8. All right. And where are we at there, Cloak?
I'm at a wonderful 8.
8 as well. Who would like to go first, Kane or Cloak? Look, you know what? I'm
Kane,
just going to go ahead and say Kane since he opened the door and went in first.
Okay.
And,
I was going to say Kane because it looks like he has a higher dexterity than I do, and so
fair enough.
It makes more logical sense that he would,
All right,
be a little
so
bit to it.
while they didn't manage to surprise you, they do have the drop on you by virtue of hearing you coming, thanks to that god-awful squealing door. So these cultists surge out of the shadows. 4 of them rush forward, and we're going to strike at Kane with a scimitar.
Okay.
That is going to be a mighty 11. So,
that does
you're-
not hit.
Yeah, you step aside and quickly parry his clumsy blow. We have a cultist slicing at Kari. Oof, with a dirty 20, so he will hit you. He cuts in under your guard, slashing you for 5 points of damage.
I do my best to not let out a cry of pain as I am cut open.
Yes. All right, so we're going to have one on... let's see. So one of the cultists lunges forward, and he kind of feints to the left and then cuts back, Glaz, and you just sort of raise your arm, and with a ripple of blue force and the thickness of your knobby hide, you just take the blade full on the arm. Tang!
Do not hit me. Why are you hitting me?
And we'll have a 19 striking at Ryodan. with the fourth cultist.
Oh, that's a lovely rune, yes.
Yes, I believe it'll be a hit. Then 3 points of slashing damage, though.
Goodness gracious me.
All right. In the back, you can see the two figures kind of holding back are dressed slightly better than these two. They're wearing black masks, and one of them holds up its hand and begins to intone in umbral, which I believe some of you understand. So as he chants, this strange black energy pulses out over their comrades. In fact, each of them will begin doing this. And Kari and Riordan, you both recognize this. They've cast the Bless spell on themselves and their allies. So they are all blessed now.
Bless up.
So,
Just confirming there's 4 plus 2 or 2 plus 2?
4 cultists, 2 acolytes. Sorry, I misspoke.
Thank you.
All right, Riordan, your turn.
Goodness gracious, the impudence of this whole situation is grating upon me. I am going to cast an inflict wounds upon the gentleman who has dared to lay his dirty finger upon me.
So, sir,
and
make your spell attack.
I'm going to do just that, darling. Just give me a moment. There we go. That's my nice. That'll be an 8 to hit, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I don't believe that will succeed. Yes. So as you strike forward with your hand wreathed in this sort of greenish black energy, his eyes widen and he jumps back out of the way, foiling your spell. Kari, your turn.
I see you, blessed creature. Then I reach out to one of the ones that have blessed themselves, one of the 2, I think you had said, and I cast True Strike on one of them.
Okay. So, all right, your vision sort of tunnels then toward that figure in the back that was chanting in umbral, and everything else kind of goes into grayscale, and he comes in sharp focus. Glaz.
The one that came and hit me and that I deflected his blow, I'm going to use the frostbite cantrip on him. So I reach out and basically grab his hand. It's actually it's a DC Constitution saving throw to see if I'm able to.
All right.
Inflict him
What's your
with
save
frostbite.
DC, sir?
12.
He will go ahead and fail that because of his weak constitution. Give me some damage.
So that's 1d6. So that would be 4 points of cold damage.
All right. He howls in pain.
And
as
he,
Yep.
in addition, he has a disadvantage on his next weapon attack roll before the end of his
good to
next
know. So he begins to tremor and shiver as a sudden blast of hypothermia begins to set in on him. And where you grabbed him on the arm, you can see his skin is turned white in the pattern of your handprint.
I told you, do not hit me. I do not like being hit by people, okay?
Kane.
Okay, Kane is going to retaliate against the guy who dared to try and strike him.
Yes, indeed. All right. So he will give as good as he got the first time. As you come in and try to counter-strike him, he parries your blade and kind of locks it against the quillions of his sword. And you're face-to-face kind of clashing with your swords now. Cloak.
So the one that is in front of that Glaz just cast his spell on and that attacked him. I imagine I'm the closest to him, so I'm going to give him an attack. So I got a +2 to this. Wait, +4.
Right. No,
so
more
here we
more
go.
than +2. Yeah.
16.
Yeah. And you're attacking with.
This
the
is
saber?
my all of a sudden. Yeah. So what everyone sees all of a sudden, as soon as Glaz gives his little speech, you just see Cloak fly up, and all of a sudden he from under his cloak, it's already had it drawn, and he's coming out, and he's stabbing this guy in the gut because he's just right in that perfect range. If he's a medium
Lunging
creature,
straight at him.
and he's like, "Why do they have masks? Masks are my thing!" And then he's rolling a D8 +4. So that'd be a 5 damage.
That is sufficient. Even your most paltry strike is enough to finish him off in his wounded state. So you drive forward with your blade and you run it into his guts, and he tries to scream, but he really can't, and he just sort of tremoring falls backward off of your sword.
Okay. And I look viciously at him.
All right, so one of the other ones is going to look at you with a little bit of trepidation, one of the two holding up in the back. He will come forward and attempt to strike at you. In what manner? He is going to strike at you with a club.
Oh, fuck, man.
Ooh, he will hit you.
All right.
Don't even need to check for the bless. All right, so you will take 2 points of bludgeoning damage as he cuffs you on the shoulder. The other one that Kari is sort of calling out is...
Look out the cloak, Oh, sorry, that type of hurt.
Motherfucker!
He is going to cast a spell, and a sort of sickly white light appears over you, swirling. It looks like corrupted starlight, and it bursts this starfire down on you. Make a dexterity saving throw, please, Kari.
My goodness, look out there.
You succeed, so you manage to twist your body out of the way, and the sacred flame scorches the stones at your feet with radiant damage.
These guys are not kidding. We need to take care of these.
That accidentally rolled at advantage, and I don't want to be the first cheater in the campaign. So,
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to re-roll or just
Go ahead and roll
that?
again. Yeah, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Keep it. We'll just move on.
It's fine. Okay. Moving on.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Even better. We're all good here. So the cultist that is next to you, Kari, that struck you with its scimitar before, is going to basically throw his shoulder into you and try to knock you off your feet. So he's going to attempt a shove. So I'd like you to make a strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics, whichever you prefer. Oof. All right, so he embarrasses himself as he tries to throw his shoulder into you, and I assume that was dexterity. Yep, and you just kind of place your hand on his shoulder and pirouette out of the way. So we're going to have a strike at Kane with a scimitar, but he can't get his blade unlocked from you, and you just sort of twist your sword around and cut his leverage so he can't strike. We will have one attempt to strike back at Riordan, but this time you just sort of dodge backwards, and the tip barely slices your shirt.
Good.
And we have, let's see, the one on Glaz was slain. 1, 2. That was 3. I think we're all good then. All right. So that is Riordan.
All right then. That has quite had enough of this nonsense. I'm going to try one more time to inflict some wounds upon him, and I expect that this time I will succeed with any luck. Let's see, that is a 15 to hit.
Oh, that gets him, but good. So you grab a hold of him, like with a surge of just irritation that he sliced your shirt. You reach out, grab him by the throat, and that greenish energy, just watch his flesh begin to turn gray and desiccate.
That's
how much damage you got for me?
9 points of damage.
All right, so he screams, which is cut off into this just gurgling cry, and his flesh begins to slough off and blacken, and he collapses dead at your feet.
I smile.
Kari.
Sweet dreams.
Kari, your turn. So you are locked in with your true strike.
I am going to take my short sword and attempt to do away with this final person.
All right.
That's supposed to be +3 on those, so it'd be an 11 and a 21 with the advantage from the true strike.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, you hit. Absolutely.
And that is going to be 1d6 + 1 damage. Mighty 5.
5. All right. So you wound him. He is indeed bloodied as your sword comes away stained with his blood.
Can I move away from him after that? I don't want to be locked just in combat with him. If I do, is that going to be an attack of opportunity?
You will provoke an opportunity attack, yes.
Please help me.
All right.
Can my cat attack at all, or can it only do the help action?
Your cat is a familiar, so it can take the help action. It can't attack. So
Okay,
if you would like
I
it
get
to
her
go,
to prepare to help the next person who's attacking, then, if possible?
you know that you can see Glaz. Looks like he's getting ready to go and strike, but he also uses spells that don't necessarily use attack rolls. So Cane or Cloak would be excellent options to help. So who would you like to send it to help?
Cloak.
All right. So let's see. That would be probably the. So that would probably be the cultist that is engaged with you at the moment is the closest. The other ones have been dispatched, so that'll work out just fine. But you slashed the acolyte, and he has to make a concentration saving throw, and he manages to maintain his bless spell. So Glaz, your turn.
So are the two acolytes within 5 feet of each other, or are either one of the acolytes in 5 feet of each other of the cultists?
There is an acolyte and a cultist. The ones on Kari are within 5 feet of each other.
Okay, so Glaz will look over and seeing that these two are right there. He reaches down and with a sort of all but graceful gesture from his sort of large trollkin hands, sort of gathers up this frost off of the cultist that he had killed, and it becomes a ice knife, and he whips it at the acolyte, the caster, and let's see how this goes. With a +4. Uh, 13.
You got him.
Nice.
So he is reeling back in combat, sort of desperately attempting to fend off Kari's blows. But with her divine insight, she is just stepping through his guard as if she knows where he's going to be, and she herds him directly into your flinging ice shard. Okay, and so with that, he takes 2 points of piercing damage, but he now needs to make a DC 12 dexterity saving throw. Which he just done blew. So do whatever to do to me.
And the cultist who's within 5 feet of him needs to make one as well.
Also has to make it. Nope.
So they both, in addition, take 6 points of frost damage as the knife hits the first one and explodes in a sort of cloud of shards, entering both him and the one next to him.
The acolyte who just took that ice shard full in the side of his chest stumbles backwards as it explodes, and then he flips backwards over a pile of rubble and lands half frozen and unmoving. The cultist desperately tries to shield his face and ends up with just his forearms and hands riddled with now bleeding ice shards stuck into it.
She saved my life once. You do not mess with my friends, I tell you that.
That's right. So that was Glaz. Cane, still locked with the dark cultist.
I'm going to try and get around this guy's defenses and carve him up good.
All right.
That is a 18.
All right, so you, with the leverage you gained the last turn when you locked his blade, you managed to throw him a little bit off guard, and you just slash right across him. Do damage.
Okay. That is max damage. That's 12 points of damage.
You slice his head from his shoulders. There's a... and he just sort of stands there blinking, and then his body falls left, his head falls right. And there's a crimson spray of drops that sort of marks your cheek.
Cane just sort of licks the blood that flecks on his lips and just turns aggressively towards the next man in his way.
So as he does, you can see the faint tips of his fangs descending just ever so slightly at the taste of blood. All right, so...
always with the flash in the trash. Oh.
So there is one remaining acolyte and one remaining terribly wounded cultist who's going to be picking ice out of his face for the rest of his life, which will be very short. Cloak, you're up.
Who's in front of Kari?
So as you move forward, you were helping on the cultist, right, Kari? Or the acolyte?
Indeed, yes.
Okay.
The cultist.
So as you move, as you get ready to choose your target, Cloak, you can see that cat darts out of the darkness, almost appearing as if out of black smoke, and swipes its claws along the calf of the cultist, and you see like this little trail of ice sort of form and sting it, and the cultist yelps in pain and looks down at this and completely takes his eyes off you. You have advantage if you'd like to attack him.
Yeah, I would. So let me see if I can do this right. All right, here we go. That would be a 22.
Oh yeah, give me some damage.
Okay, and so as he attacks him, and he's like, "Look, cat scratch fever!" And then he is, as he's not paying attention, he's literally jumping up and like jabbing at his throat with 12 points of damage.
All right, Cloak of max damage. All right, so he is not even looking, and he barely notices as the blade strikes up under his jaw, through his soft palate, and into his brain. And he stiffens and collapses at your feet.
The hell of a disease!
All right, so there is one remaining acolyte. He is going to look around at the just slaughtered remains that were once his minions. And in any sort of normal situation, you would expect to see at least a pang of fear, a little bit of hesitation. You see nothing. Just a grimace stretches the face visible beneath the kind of half mask that he wears, and he screams out a curse in Umbral and calls down a burst of radiant flame upon Cloak. Cloak, make a dexterity saving throw.
So hold on, I gotta make sure I get a thing for being a gnome. No, that's intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. All right, here comes my dexterity saving throw. Yes. +4, a 10.
That will fail, unfortunately. It's a DC 12, so you will take some radiant damage from this sickly white light. 4 points of radiant damage sear you as you try and twist out of the way. So the rest of you, as that cold radiance sears into him, his cloak that he wears with all of the plants and the billowing, some of that moss withers, and you could swear that it looks like the cloak itself flinches away from the energy. Maybe just a trick of the shadows playing around your dark vision. So that would be Riordan.
It's totally what it is.
Goodness. How many of these guys are left standing? Who's
only one. All of the cultists, all 4 of the cultists and one of the acolytes is slaughtered. Only one remains, although he is unhurt.
All right, fine. I will approach this gentleman lively, and I will attempt to stab him with the dagger, which is on my side. He probably deserves it. So, you've been asking for this, haven't you? That's a 14 to hit.
14 gets him. As you punch through his robes, it does not seem like he's wearing any sort of armor underneath.
Oh, dear, that was a mistake for you, wasn't it?
Poor planning, poor planning.
Yeah, 6 points of damage into your flesh. And I'm gonna get really close when I do it.
Sorry, how much damage did you say? 6. Oh. He does not care for that at all. However, so as the blade bites in, and it does indeed, it's a palpable strike, and you can feel it cut into flesh and possibly even nick bone, and it comes out covered in his blood. He looks down, and this red gout just sort of spurts into his palm, and he and looks at you, and his eyes just sort of get wider, and he reaches out with his own bloody hand.
I'm like licking the dagger right now, like an alerts from
Nice.
Fellowship Lorraine.
Very good, very good. Kari, it's your turn. As this cackling madman reaches his bloody palm towards your companion.
I'm going to strike out with my short sword, hoping to stomp this person from hurting him any farther.
Very well.
With a 21.
Oh, yeah. You got him good.
Also, Fate of Grind gives a nat 20 to McLoken. Happy birthday.
Nat 20 to
Aw.
Delightful.
Thanks, Mike.
Nice.
7 piercing damage. My apologies.
You're striking with a short sword?
Yes.
Is that right? All right. So as he
Yes.
reaches out his hand toward Riordan, you just sort of take a little half step forward and just drive your blade into his ribs under his outstretched arm, and his laugh just sort of lingers on and slowly dies on his lips, and he falls forward. So the sounds of battle echo in the chamber for a moment and then die, and you're left with the smell of blood tinged with mold. And these corpses littering the ground around you.
They must have been diseased to join in a hunt like this. They must not have thought that they could win.
They didn't seem to have any problem with dying.
That is
No,
not
they're
the natural way of things. People usually don't just charge into death unless cornered.
He had quite a mad look in his eyes. Perhaps there was something stranger at work. They were certainly no common bandits like those brigands back there.
Oh.
Dan, question. Was
Yes,
there a
sir.
light source in here?
There was not. It seemed like they could see in the gloom as well as you can. Although, by all appearances, they look to be human, which seems very strange.
Okay.
Humans have such a strange way about them with death.
That
You
they
look like a
do.
human too. And he's like taking off the mask, and looking at the mask and like investigating these people for stuff.
Okay, so the
Wow,
masks
that's so much
are
more.
basically just simple leather half masks, and they've been painted black. However, on their faces, the ones who were masked, they have intricate tattoos, blacking out their eye sockets around their eyeballs, and then stretching off into umbral script, going up their foreheads and across their bald scalps and down their cheeks, even down to their neck, and disappearing beneath their robes.
Can I roll Arcana?
Oh, go ahead.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. I'd be like, Glass,
Can
look.
can I actually give you advantage on it? Give you an assist with the, if these are either runes or glyphs, that's something that Laz knows about.
Yes. And I will say that, you can absolutely help out and give advantage. And I will note that Glaz and Kari both recognize these, not only as umbral script. As a language, it's sort of, it's not really meaningful, but it's invoking shadow magic.
You said that he had cried out in Umbral with his last cast. Was that just to cast his last spell, or was that an actual curse that he threw on us?
It was definitely just sort of a venomous curse, like he was condemning your souls to the void, and then it sort of segued into the verbal component for his spell.
Okay.
Okay. I got an 11 on that Arcana.
11. All right. So, given that they are able to point out that it has to do with shadow magic and the particular placement of these glyphs and such, you suspect that this feeds into how they were able to see and thrive in the dark so well. That these tattoos must have been infused with some sort of dark magic that makes them at home in the darkness.
No,
So
that's very interesting.
that is super interesting. Like they can see in the dark when they can't see in the dark because they got tattoos. I mean,
Marvelous.
I never heard of that.
While my
This-
companions are discussing this, can I start picking at the bodies?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Just searching them for anything worthwhile.
Anything that would be better than the equipment that I have here.
Oh, unlikely, unless you fancy a scimitar over a short sword. So there are some useful spell components you might be able to scavenge from the two acolytes that you could replenish some of your stocks with. They have component pouches. Each of them carries a club. The cultists all carry scimitars, and believe they're wearing
I'll take
leather
everything and
armor.
anything I think that's valuable and put it in a pile for people to go
I'll
through. I'm not
take a
trying to like
scimitar.
take it from behind their backs and yeah.
Sure. If you're looking to scavenge things that you can hawk later, the scimitars and the leather armor would be worthwhile if you want to spend a few minutes stripping them.
I'll take that scimitar if you don't mind, Harry.
I toss it to him.
Very well. Poking through the robes of one of the tattooed acolytes, you find in an inner pocket, you find 3 small onyx gems, and they're worth a total of 50 gold pieces together.
I find 2 small onyx gems, you say?
All right, sorry. 3 gems worth 60 gold. I mean, 2
gems worth
40.
40 gold.
Also, that's a second nat 20 for Cloak from Genli Eye. Thank you, my friend.
Happy birthday, my
thank
friend.
you.
And just remind me on procedure, he gets to choose when to use those, yes?
That's right, yeah. Players get to use nat 20s when they want, and the DM calls when we have to use nat 1s.
Very well. All right, so yeah, you
so-
spend a few minutes stripping the gear from them, no problem.
So Cloak, he would be analyzing the tattoos a little bit further, and if there's any, specifically if there's any blood on it, and taking his cloak and trying to wipe the blood off, and then like start reading it, and being like,
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Okay,
That's all
so
he's
you're
doing.
wiping. Okay, you're just cleaning the blood off of your blade while reading off the runes.
well, no, he's off the bodies, like so. Basically, he's like
okay.
using the cloak to clean off the
ink.
blood, and like yeah.
And wiping the ink runes off of the cultists. Is that what you said?
Well, if they do come off, but any blood,
Oh, yeah.
he's like trying to wipe off to get
sure.
a better read on it.
You also
yeah,
going to pick up a third nat 20 from Mike, and he's also going to give you a magic item, which Dan, you can decide upon the nature of, like local.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go away. Go to bed.
You have a
Goblins are plenty
child,
over here.
magical goblin child.
There's a gnome in your house.
All right. So I'm sorry. There was a magic item for McLoken. Is that
That's
is that what
right,
I
yeah.
understood?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can
alright,
decide what it is.
Coolest birthday ever.
Okay. Well, let's get interesting with this. Give me one moment while you guys plan your next
No
move.
worries.
So as you're patting down the bodies, yeah. All right. Go ahead, Will.
Remind me, what exactly are we here for again? We're searching for something. Although I got a bit confused with all that blood back there.
These lost articles. Don't you remember? There were some. We were hired to come down here. They felt that they had come down this direction. But what I am interested in is these runes. This is very peculiar that they would have runes on humans in this way. You see, I call Kari over. Kari, dear, if you will take a look here, see if we. This is shadow magic. This is your purveyance, yes? You have used this before. Things along these lines, not this specific magic, but you can notice the curvature of the rune here. I'm just trying to point out to you that this is something that you might know about. You'll see it is something right here. Are you looking? Kitty, right here.
She nods slowly, waiting for the usual tyrant of these two communicating back and forth. Yes, Glass. And she sends Varus over instead of herself and uses the cat to take a look to see if it is indeed shadow magic, trying to seem a little bit more aloof. You
Have
are
a voice
very
like
astute
honey.
in your studies. Why, thank
As
you.
you're Cloak, as you're wiping down the bodies, you notice on the other acolyte, the one you didn't really check so closely, when you get over to him and start clearing off the tattoos to get a better look there, this one has a very thin thread he's wearing around his neck, which is probably why your compatriots missed it. As you get in there to try and clear the blood away, you find it, and the thread kind of has fallen behind him, behind his back on the ground, but it looks like he's wearing something bound around his neck.
I would try to unbind it and see what he's wearing.
Sure. I mean, it's just a little black thread, so you can just kind of pop it loose. You pull it up, and it's weighted on the end. You pull it up, and dangling before your eyes is a small key. You can't really make out much detail about it other than its shape. It's heavy, so it's probably made of something along the lines of iron. But it just kind of spins on the end of the thread, and as you watch it, it spins a little bit faster and then reverses direction.
Do Glaz's eyes widen at a key such as this?
Mine, found it. I found it.
I understand that is yours, but is this something I recognize, Dan? In my readings and with my study of ley
That's how
lines.
you know you're in a dream or
geomancy?
not, isn't it?
It wouldn't have anything to do with ley lines, likely,
Okay,
but anyone
it's not one of those keys.
it is not a key of Velis. No, no.
I was getting
No,
very
it looks just kind of like a very simple little key with just kind of little teeth. Doesn't look very intricate or
Doors
anything.
around here might open
Just kind of fit in the
doors.
palm of your hand. However, it does seem to be behaving very strangely. When you hold something up by a string, it kind of dangles, but it seems to like pick up momentum on its own and then change it, and it's behaving very oddly.
He would kind of like then do this, kind of like move around to see if the key moves in oddly.
It doesn't seem like it doesn't douse in any particular direction or anything like that. It's just that momentary sort of odd physical behavior from it that tips you off to this is not a perfectly normal key.
Look, my friend,
is
I
it-
will not take the.
Oh no, I was gonna look at Glass and be like,
Can you tell what it is? It's not moving right. It's like it might be magic.
Yes, I would. It seems as though this behaving like has magical properties to it. While I can't do it right this moment, when we have a chance, give me about 10 minutes. I will not take it from you. I will give it back, but I can tell you about what it might be able to do for us. In the meantime, do be careful. You never know off of cultists like these if something might be have a little whammy on the side of it. Do you know what I thought?
Especially if they're messing with like umbral and shadows and stuff. I don't know.
Can I send Varus while they're talking to just kind of keep an eye around us?
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you want to send him? Just to walking
just keep
around
a
the
general
chamber,
like
or-
perimeter. Yeah, just a general perimeter look.
So it
and
looks
they
like,
had to ask me.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
They had asked me, they'd asked Kari, sorry, if I recognized any of just kind of the remnants or the magic, if it was from the Shadow Realm at all, if it was something that kind of spoke out to me in that way.
What about the runes or the room? Or the keys?
Runes and the magic, just in general
Okay,
for
well,
what they were having. Their spell components, maybe...
You were able to recognize those glyphs and that script immediately, basically, as it is invoking shadow magic. And it seems like those tattoos were mystically infusing these beings with the essence of shadow itself, which is probably how they could see in the dark and some of the other things that they were doing.
Laz, your senses are keen on the hunt once again. This is indeed shadow magic.
So Dan, is this
So,
something that I could copy down? Not necessarily that's a spell, but just as a rune
you could certainly
know
take some
about.
notes if you wanted to do further research.
Glaz will take a moment to
later.
pull out a piece of parchment and sketch them up.
Since there's kind of a lot going on right now, I might suggest this is a good time if you guys wanted to bind your wounds, take a breather. It would be a good time for a short rest to identify the key, to copy those things, all that kind of stuff.
If it seems as though we're out of danger.
Yeah. The danger seems past at the moment. It looks like there's another corridor running off into the cartways on the far side of the chamber, but you can send the cat familiar down a ways, and he can either report back, or you can see through his eyes even that it goes quite a ways, and there's no visible threats down there.
Am I able to roll a hit dice to regain some health?
Yep. Yeah, you guys can
Okay.
complete a short rest,
As everyone is taking a short rest, not having suffered in combat and having no input on the conversation, Kane is going to post himself in the corridor as sort of quietly as he can. Seeing it's sort of a longer corridor, he will slide his sword back into its sheath and take his bow, knocking an arrow, just in case anything decides to come prying.
Sure. So he'll just keep a watch down the corridor and be ready to put an arrow through it if it's unfriendly in any manner. Got it. All right. So a couple of... oh, yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to do the identify, but if you've got other stuff to describe.
No. I was going to run into that. I was going to run right into that.
Yeah. No. So Glaz, he actually takes unattaches the skin, this big skin that he has with this map of Midgard on it, and he takes it off of his belt and from over his shoulder and throws it out and puts it on the reverse side where you see all these runes and circles and different patterns. And one of those is one of the places on that skin where he's tattooed in an identification basically circle for him to do his little ceremony.
Sure.
And he takes a moment and just sort of waving his hands over it. You can see the runes begin to move and glow a little bit as he casts Identify
ritually. Yep. All right. So over the course of 10 minutes, he lays out this cloak that you've seen him wear all the time that has this map of Midgard essentially inked into it, and you've seen that there are just numerous strange glyphs and diagrams sort of tracing all over this map, and you've learned over time that this is how he encodes his spells. This cloak is essentially his spell book. And so 10 minutes pass, and you are drawn mystically in tune with this strange key that, as you had a little time to handle it, you are quite certain it's magical. And after you complete your spell, you learn that it is called a mystery key. It has a weak but potentially very useful enchantment on it. It has a small chance, 5% in game terms, of opening any lock that it is inserted into. Once it opens a lock, it vanishes.
You got that from Xanthar's.
I did.
I love that key.
Yeah.
This is basically a pick your own birthday present. Like it's a random birthday present because you'll unlock something at some point.
Yeah.
Loot crates.
Yep.
I also have a viewer decision here for you, Dan, when you're ready.
Sure.
Ooh, cool. My friend Cloak, you will especially appreciate this. This key. Now, you can put it in any lock, anywhere. And one of them, it will eventually open. It is magical that way. It has a chance for you to open it. So you always should give it a try, especially if it might be something really good. But once you use it, once it actually unlocks something, poof, it's gone.
What about a bakery after hours, and then we open it, and then yes, I have plans.
That sounds
You
delightful.
know how I like the
Yes,
snickerdoodles. If you do use it for that, I would like you to bring me back a snickerdoodle, okay?
I will bring you back a snickerdoodle.
Thank you.
I do
All right,
not
so,
understand the need to buy your food when you can hunt for it.
You can't hunt snickerdoodles, darling. Trust me,
You're-
I've tried.
Have you seen a cookie running through the forest? I don't think so.
Cloak is, in this instance, correct, Carrie. I haven't seen one.
It looks like we are confusing you very much. At some point, I will introduce you to the snickerdoodle. I guarantee you will enjoy it.
First thing we do.
All right. Will,
want
you
to
said
do-
we had a. Will, you said we had a viewer decision of some sort?
That's right, yeah, you can ask the chat a question and we'll poll it and see what I come up with.
All right. Just any sort of question at all. What'll happen next? That sort of deal.
Yeah, you could do what happened next, you could have it like what magic item did I find, or what's behind the door, what kind of trap did I run into, whatever you feel like.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Try good stuff though. It's your first
I
time
was
here.
gonna
You want to
say.
make friends on Encounter Roleplay. Like,
What wonderful games and toys.
what a great DM you are. You're the best.
Delightful.
How many
All right.
snickers did they find?
How many?
How many snickerdoodles are on the plate?
For the first general kind of permanent magic item that we encounter, should I roll on the negative quirks table or the interesting traits table? Interesting beneficial traits table.
Nice.
He's
Okay,
cutting
that's a good viewer
You
decision right
are
there.
mean.
Okay, we all know what that answer's going to be.
Yeah, chat
So,
is great. I love
How
you.
do I learn this answer? Do I have to watch the chat? What's going on? I'm excited.
Chat, it's my
He has-
birthday.
He has magic that he uses on Twitch, and he actually puts
Okay.
up a thing where you can click on the screen and do the vote, and then he will tell us what the vote outcome is, and it is all part
Excellent.
of the encounter.
So we've got what, negative quirks for the first one, and the second one is positive traits?
Positive trait. Yeah, we'll call it that. I don't remember the specific name
Yeah,
of them, but
Negative
From
positive.
earlier, I had a
I was
wild
gonna-
magic surge. Caster has vivid dreams of his own death each night, which is really interesting because my character, one of her bonds, I suffer awful visions of a coming disaster. So that just kind of ties right in there.
okay, noted.
That's awesome.
Quick DM question. With
Yes.
doing the Identify spell, would I have time during this short rest to also use Arcane Recovery? or is that be mutually exclusive?
I believe
I'm
you
fine
can
if
just
it's
do
not.
that.
I just
No, you can do that just as part of finishing a short rest. So, and in fact, you probably can't do the the spell during the short rest. But you guys have plenty of time. You can cast the spell, then rest. No big deal.
Okay. One extra donation has just come in here from Socratic Method Man. Cheers for 2,500, and to give his birthday homie a celestial labradoodle mount. Its name is Puff. Puff will serve you well, Dan. I give this information to you to use as you please and to bring in.
All right. So at some point, you need to get a celestial dog mount.
That's correct.
Okay.
Beautiful.
That's pretty amazing.
I roll Puff. Puff is my favorite. I roll around with him, and he's cuddles.
Wait, you just put a dog in a cat party? Oh, this is gonna be great.
Got it.
Oh, this is
okay.
going to be great.
I also have a pet mouse.
This is going to be an interesting campaign.
We're gonna
all
have
right.
a
pet
zoo
mouse?
soon. I do have
Varus
pet mouse.
chases that mouse occasionally. I never let Varus kill it, but I will screw with you every now and then and make the mouse fear for its life. In that
Do we
douchey
all have
pet
animal
kind.
companions apart from Raiden?
Wait, you have a
Oh,
bird too.
I've got
This
you,
is
darling.
great.
I don't.
You're
yeah,
my
yeah.
animal companion.
Yeah. So yeah, while you're keeping watch, Kane, your owl sort of flutters over on ghostly wings and lights on your shoulder and just sort of stares down the hallway with you. And the rest of you, occasionally the owl turns its head 180 degrees to look back at you, and then goes back to looking down the hall.
Interestingly, this is an eagle owl, and eagle owls are legendarily, superstitiously known as ill omens. Specifically, they spell death and disaster and the ill fate. And as a bounty hunter, he makes a fantastic companion.
Yes. All right. So everybody completed their short rest. Do we have the results on that poll, or is that going to be a later
Oh,
thing?
that is definitely a negative quirk right
Yeah,
there. But not
overwhelmingly.
quite as close.
Roger
It was
that.
64% rather than 100, which I was expecting. So there's some rooting in our favor there.
Yeah, that's not.
That was us. That was all of us, like voting, like making fake accounts and voting.
I'm not even gonna lie. I voted for the negative quirk. Screw you guys.
I'd even vote because I'm afraid. So I think the only thing that Cloak would do, like as he's resting, is he would be sitting next to Glaz or by Glaz as he's like identifying, and he's like in his like trance and he's like focusing for the 10 minutes, and you would see like a little mouse come out from the foliage that's on his shoulder, and it's a little squeaky. And he's like, oh, hi, Tonks. Oh, there you go. And he's got like a little bit of bread and he's feeding it. And then he sees the cat and he's like, no, kitty, not today. Nuh-uh. No, you're not playing with her. And then the owl comes in and he's like, okay, Tonks, you gotta go back in. This is not
This is death. All right. So as you are all going through binding your wounds, taking your rest, recovering your magical energies, and keeping watch, Ryoden, you sort of leaning back against the wall, relaxing, lamenting the tear in your shirt. You're looking out over these bloodied bodies and the pools quickly cooling and coagulating on the stones, and you just sort of stare off into it for a while, into this blood-soaked stone.
Yummy.
Years ago, when you were still living in favor of the Blood King, your noble family ruled a small province of the Greater Duchy of Morgau. You remember serving in the small shrine to Morena, the Red Goddess. You remember the differences in the dogma that you and your family preached, and you kept it quiet because there were others who worshipped the Red Maiden that didn't take kindly to your, as they saw it, coddling and weak approach to her worship. But why waste all that life? That's what you thought.
Right.
And that was the approach you took to her worship. You weren't the slaughterers. of these bearers of blood that the Red Goddess wants so much. You were the shepherds tending the flock. And yes, they would give of themselves, and even you at times would offer your blood up to your lady. And in exchange, she gave you power. She gives you the ability to heal wounds, to cure diseases, to strike down your enemies, to turn their very blood against them, should they dare rise against you and against her will. But the greater duchy being what it was, and the living sacrifices and orgiastic rituals that reveled in the death and bloodletting and lustful aspects of Morena, forced your family to keep your particular take on your religious observances secret. Despite that, your family's influence began to grow. And it wasn't long before a woman, a vampire, you knew it immediately when you saw her standing in your family's foyer speaking to your mother. She carried herself unlike any of the living. And what are Riordan's feelings toward vampires in general, as a Dhampir?
In general, I have no real disdain for them. Indeed, I at times will find nobility and worship in those of elder blood. However, there are many of them whom I distaste, particularly those who will feed too viciously of the flesh and of my flock.
Indeed. And what of the idea that in the Blood Kingdom, that particularly a Dhampir and one of noble birth, that it is seen as a reward or an increase in station to eventually be chosen to become a full vampire? What do you think about that?
I would be lying if I would say that I did not myself dream of such lofty heights.
All right. Okay.
But others
So
might not be quite so deserving.
Certainly. So when you see this this simply dressed in a red traveling robe with sort of a skin-tight crimson and black leather underneath it, you see this vampiress standing there, and you have that moment where you're just a little bit awestruck. And she seems to be conversing very amiably with your mother. You don't detect any tension in the room, and that is always a bit of a question which way one of these encounters is going to go. And for the moment, this one seems to be going well. So she notices you coming down the stairs, and she smiles and beckons you forward.
I walk towards her immediately.
She touches you on the shoulder and pulls you in next to her to stand before this woman, and she says, "Riordan, I am so pleased to introduce you to Cosina Horosu. She is handmaiden to the High Priestess herself, and she has come to spread such good news for us." And the vampiress effects you have never seldom seen such physical grace. This just short rolling curtsy, and then she straightens right back up and offers you this smile that manages to quicken your pulse a little bit.
My lady, it is a pleasure to have you in our household. How can I be of your service?
Not nearly as much as it is a pleasure for me to be here, accepting your gracious hospitality. I was just telling your mother that word of your faith has reached her grace's ears. And she smiles again to sort of mollify that sudden pang of fear that wells up within you. And she says, "Times for the kingdom may be changing, and her grace has seen that your way is the future. The brutality and warmongering that King Lucan has pulled this duchy into, it can lead only to death and destruction. Why, the servants of Kors," and when she mentions Kors, there's a little bit of he's a warlike sun god, worshipped throughout the crossroads, and you know that his paladins who swear the oath of radiance are among the most feared among the Blood Kingdoms, because it seems that their holy devotion makes them perfectly suited to destroy vampires and undead in general, as they channel the power of the sun. Should Lucan's ambition grow too far, all of the crossroads and even the seven kingdoms beyond, perhaps even the far-off Grand Duchy of Dornig will unite against us, and against that combined might of all of Midgard, we cannot stand. And she sort of watches you to gauge your reaction.
I agree. I did not know there were others in our order who so believed as such, but I have been granted visions of the future, and this is what I have seen as well. Our great and noble kingdom being scattered down before us for Lucan's ambition. What this greater duchy needs is someone with more control over his bloodlusts.
Yes, and this unchecked desire to grow our borders, it will lead to nowhere prosperous. We have seen what has happened with the Imperium of the Ghouls. Do we wish to be driven underground to scratch a living out of tunnels? I do not.
Quite. Never. That is for slaves and the cattle.
She offers you and your mother just this sort of relieved sigh and smile, and she says, "Come then, we have much to discuss. We should summon the Lord of the House, and there are plans to make."
Of course.
And so she is drawn into your house by your mother, and your father comes and joins with her, and you begin discussing what very quickly to your ear sounds like the brewings of a coup against the Blood King. In addition, she begins laying out her plan to gather your teachings and begin to send them out to create splinter and even hidden cults in lands beyond the Blood Kingdom, to see to it that this vein of your faith grows strong.
Excellent.
And so you spend perhaps the next year and a half helping to oversee the codification of your teachings being written down into particular books, very careful to hide it amongst the more mainstream scripture of the worship of Morena, that it wouldn't be discovered too easily, and begin sending agents out to other cities in the Crossroads and the seven cities to begin setting up small shrines, hidden shrines to the proper and good and fruitful worship of the Red Goddess that will see you through these dark times.
Incredible work is being done.
So, you mentioned to me that Riordan had a paramour back in the Blood Kingdoms. Do you have some information on that individual that you might share with us a little bit?
Share with the DM. Why? What a good idea. Yes. I've taken several lovers and interests over the time, but my most recent one and most serious one is a man named Geniel. He's a handsome young boy, and Dampier, much like myself, in a similar noble house. Unfortunately, his family do not see eye to eye with mine, certainly not on the matters of Morena and blood worship, so we've had to keep things a little on the down low, but never mind. That's how I like it.
Certainly. So as time goes on, can you spell that name for me?
I will type it for you in the chat, but it is Janiel.
All right. So over that time, as you begin making these preparations to send the budding seed of your faith out into the world, Janiel begins to become more and more interested in your work. And although you may be perhaps wary at first because what you're doing is quite frankly treasonous and heretical in the eyes of many in the faith of the Red Goddess, you quickly grow to trust him, and he becomes your closest confidant and one of your best agents in seeing to it that messages are discreetly carried and received between your contacts in other cities, and in rallying your allies within the Greater Duchy over the course of perhaps a few years as these plans are laid. Over that time, tensions begin to escalate. It becomes clear that Lucan is preparing for a war. He is seeing to it that more and more raids happen into other lands to bring in living bodies that can either be food or transformed and uplifted into undead troops to swell the Blood Kingdom's already impressive ranks. And so your family begins to grow tense as the preparations for war increase, even as your preparations amongst your faith do. Cain.
Yes.
During this time, this perhaps, what would this have been? Not very long ago at all, in fact. How long has it been that you've been in exile, Will?
I think Riodan is recently exiled, so
Yeah, very
it could
recently,
be
perhaps.
as little as like a month or a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, just a few months. So you're thinking back to your the job that went wrong. You'd spent so many years wandering the length and breadth of Midgard, visiting the different lands. You don't even remember what it was about the Blood Kingdom and the endless crusades and the battles against those cursed sun-worshipping butchers who could just wade through otherwise immortal undead flesh, cutting through you like sunlight through shadow. At some point, there was just too much, and you turned your back on your oaths, you turned your back on your liege, and you just left. You would swing back through occasionally. You maintained contacts within the Blood Kingdoms, but more and more you found yourself drifting away and into the crossroads. And at the center of the crossroads, you found the free city of Zobek. And you remember fighting there amongst the mercenary companies. You remember helping to cast down the accursed House Strauss that once tried to spread the taint of infernalism and shadow magic throughout all of the land from their castle near Zobek. And it was here that you finally found some semblance of peace, at least a shred of contentment. And doing what you did best, finding people, quietly watching, waiting, listening, learning the things that people didn't want you to learn simply by dint of overlooking your presence, since you knew quite well how to make yourself blend into the background. You very quickly caught the attention of the secret police of the Blue House, the let us say the propaganda, information, and spy network that helps support Zobek's rule. And you had conducted several missions for them that were quite successful. And as you rose through the ranks, you begin to get more and more sensitive and important missions. And the vast majority of these would be tail this person and find out who they talk to, or break into this office at night and leave this stone in an unobtrusive place where someone won't find it accidentally. As your trust within the organization rose, you began to be sent out to retrieve people, people for questioning, people who might have stepped over a line. And the pay was good. The pay was excellent. And more than that, the connections were excellent, because this put you in a position to know just about everyone in Zobek. From the highest born to the lowliest kobolds tinkering in the cramped streets and junkyards of the kobold ghettos. One night, a note appears for you at a dead drop. It appears with a familiar mark. You don't know who exactly sent it, but you recognize the mark as a trusted one. And you see a name, a sketch, and a sum of money that leaves no question in your mind what this individual's fate is to be, and it is not to be brought back anywhere. So you see the name Goresh Hammerstrike. Immediately strikes you as dwarven. And with the name in the sketch and quite a bit of coin in your pocket to loosen tongues and open doors, you very swiftly find it simple to locate this individual, and you're shocked when you do. It is he is a member of a caravan from the Dwarven Cantons, not too far from Zobek, and it looks like he is preparing a return trip from the Temple of Rava, the clockwork goddess. And as you approach, you can hear the clattering of clockworks, the clash of tools as they create clockwork creatures and marvelous devices, and perhaps even they're preparing to imbue a gear forged with life. And you see this individual delivering what looks like materials. And you're able to slip in close enough, not close enough to draw attention or give yourself away, but close enough to see that he is helping to unload some rather sturdy, heavily locked, heavily guarded chests. And you've been around long enough to know what's in there. They are strange metal alloys, the composition of which are a closely, deadly guarded secret. And so this individual is sort of scurrying about, helping move these chests into the temple, and once their work is done, the caravan saddles up and begins to head back out of town towards the gate. As you spend some time tailing him, how would you like to go about it? Just kind of, what's your approach here?
Through the cities, Kane is everyone and no one. Kane moves with the practiced ease of someone who's been here for long enough to sort of know all the back alleys, all of the shortcuts, and occasionally he loses sight, but he never loses track of his prey, his quarry, as they mingle their way through the streets. But knowing that it would be foolish to attempt anything in the city, he waits, bides his time, and knowing that they won't outrun him with a heavy carriage, probably laden with coin and various other supplies heading back to the Iron Crag Mountain, he waits until they're on the road, till they're vulnerable. And there's a million and one people, bandit attacks are a common occurrence. If anything goes wrong, there will be no doubt in anyone's mind that it was a simple bandit attack. But he doesn't plan for anything to go wrong. He finds an ambush point, gets ahead, and he waits.
So are you going alone, or to sort of help sell the cover of the bandit attack? Do you want to take some of that heavy purse you were given and hire some muscle and some to sort of assist in that?
He hires a few people, but they are people who are new, people who are eager for coin, who won't be missed, and people who definitely aren't up to the job. And their job is just to harry the caravan and probably lose their life in the process.
But they think this is going to be easy pickings on a poorly guarded merchant caravan heading back heavy with coin to the cantons.
Exactly, and he finds good cover and tells them that they are to report back to him in Zobek when they complete it. But he follows them as they follow the caravan, gets ahead of them, and waits for the slightly besieged caravan to come to his ambush point.
All right. So you pick a small rocky sort of pass-through in the foothills of the Iron Crags. You don't want to get into the Iron Crags themselves, because only madmen and idiots try to attack the dwarves on their home turf. That's a great way to end up dead or worse. But as you wait, you can hear the caravan. You can actually see the cloud of dust coming in the distance before you can see or hear any sign of the wagons themselves. And you permit yourself a little bit of a smile as you limber your weapons and crouch down in your hiding place in your little blind up on the top of the perhaps 10 or 15 foot rocky bluff that the road passes right next to, as you watch your quarry being driven so well into your trap. And it looks like the muscle and cut purses, the thugs that you hired, are doing their job excellently. They're just riding forward on their horses, whooping and hollering, and doing their best to try and drive this caravan into what they think is an overwhelming force that's going to crush it, and then they'll split scads and scads of loot. So as they come forward, you can see that the dwarves who are manning the caravans are tense, but not entirely frightened, right? It looks like they're pretty intent on just leaving these guys in the dust as best they can and getting into the cantons. And you're quite aware that once they do that, if these poor bastards follow them in there, that they're just done. They'll never be seen or heard from again.
So,
All right.
as the caravan is attacked from behind, he knocks an arrow and he aims for whatever mule, whatever horse is drawing the carriage. And he's going to remain out of this until the last of his allies fall. But he's going to stop the caravan.
Okay. All right. So as they drive into the short rocky cut that you're waiting on top of, you loose an arrow and then just sort of step back behind the boulder, and you hear the death scream of the horse and the crash of the wagon as it overturns and slams into the rocky bluff. And then the dying begins. The dwarves can no longer run, so they have to turn and stand their ground. And when they do, reality comes crashing down on these poor bastards that you've hired to their deaths. They give out a hue and cry in the beginning, and within seconds, you can hear them begging for mercy and screaming for retreat, and knowing full well that they will find very little. So when is it that you would like to make your strike?
I wait patiently until the first separates to sort of check over any of the bodies, and they separate, like maybe a few check the bodies, a few check the damage to the carriage, and he will isolate whoever gave the orders, whoever mustered them, or drove the carriage, whoever seems to be leading this party will be the first target.
All right, so you're going to try and kill all the dwarves, not just the one you need to and get out of there.
He will.
That looks like it might be a very tall order. You can see several of the dwarf soldiers using heavy shields, and the way they move almost in lockstep in kind of a phalanx formation, that suggests to you that they're Canton shield bearers, which means that they are elite soldiers.
In which case, no, I'll just look for... Do I recognize my quarry amongst them?
Oh, very easily indeed. Yeah, you can see... and
armored, I presume?
He is lightly armored, maybe leather, perhaps. He is himself not a warrior, so this looks like it's just getting better and better. As you watch, several of the soldiers begin to fan out into the woods that you ran up through. Looks like they're making sure that there are no other pursuers coming behind the fellows that they just slaughtered. And then you can see the man that you were sent to deal with currently trying to unhitch the dead horse from the overturned wagon so they can start riding it.
He's at the front, closest to me. I line up the shot, wait until he's sort of stooped low to the ground, and aim probably for like the shoulder to go straight through down into his heart. All right.
It's child's play. It's maddeningly simple, and it honestly starts to prickle in the back of your head that something might not be right at about the time when you loose the arrow and you realize just how easily this all fell into place. The arrow strikes home, he barely issues a cry and topples forward into the dirt. A few of the dwarves, noticing the commotion, come over to inspect and begin heading up to his body.
Not one to waste a moment of confusion. He quickly sort of picks his quiver up, slings it across his shoulder and his bow, and he's going to make his way not straight back to Zobek. He's going to make his way just away from here into the most cover, melting into the...
Gonna just melt off into the forest and then lay low for a little while. Maybe swing through one of the outlying towns, spend some time there for a bit. As you're sort of running through this plan, it's all just sort of coming together, and you're starting to keep an eye out around you, feeling like, you know, you're not out of this quite yet, but everything's going very, very nicely. And as you break cover into the tree line, there is a sudden wall of steel swinging out from behind a great oak straight at your face. and it catches you right on the bridge of the nose, and there's just a flash of light, and you find yourself knocked off your feet, and as you come to your senses, staring up at a heavily armored dwarven woman with her hair pulled back in just this series of tight braids that bun up, giving an enemy nothing to get a handhold on. She has a massive shield with dwarven runes all over it and a spear in the other hand, and she looks at you, kind of sneers, and gets ready to drive the spear tip into your throat. You're disoriented, your eyes, there's blood in them, but as you're staring up at her, you find that she makes one mistake. She meets your gaze. And so you think you might have one chance to save your life.
Okay, where is it? Let me just check how this works. So, if I meet the gaze of someone, where is it? Leaves my actions. Sorry, need to roll.
Sorry.
Okay, so Predatory Charm is a Dampier ability. As an action, you can magically beguile the mind of a creature that you can see within 30 feet. For 1 hour, you have advantage on charisma checks made against the target. If you or any of your allies attack or damage the target, this effect ends. However, when the effect ends, the target becomes repulsed by you and becomes hostile towards you until the next dawn, during which time they are immune to the effect. The hostile creature does not necessarily attack you outright, but it won't deal with you in any way and might actively try to hinder you.
Right.
I am going to look up at her, and hand is reflexively on the dagger on his hip, but there is a spear, and she will easily
driving for you.
Yeah. And he quickly raises both his hands, cocks his head, doesn't say anything outright, just surrenders. And can I give a persuasion or maybe
essentially you have sort of that reflexive moment where you can force that beguiling charm from your vampiric blood just sort of into that gaze that you lock eyes with her, and in that moment you're hoping that will be enough to at least stay her hand. And as you do, and you very obviously take your hand off your weapon and surrender, you can feel the tingle, sort of that hot rush through your blood, and the pang of hunger that follows. But you see the spark just sort of flicker in her eyes, and there's this wash of relief as she stops the spear point by twisting it to the side and driving it into the ground right next to your throat. And she sort of leans down and plants the weight of her plate armor on you and says, "Move and die. Do I make myself clear?"
He just nods slowly.
So she, without really taking her eyes off of you, barks in Dwarvish, and you can hear her voice just sort of echo off the cliffs, and in moments there are more dwarves coming. And so you spend a few minutes as they haul you up to your feet and clap you in manacles, thinking, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so you are dragged to the dwarven cantons, but thankfully not slain on the spot, thanks to your ability to beguile her in that moment. And perhaps more in your fortune, she does not accompany you to the cantons. She turns and rides back to Zobek. So thankfully, by the time your spell wears off, she won't be in your presence and won't be likely to just off you then. However, you're dragged to the dwarven cantons of the Iron Crags, and you are thrown before their leadership and very, very quickly judged to be taken as a thrall, because they've recognized your strength and your fighting ability, and there was apparently a report given that though you did murder this individual, they weren't anyone of particular import, and you did cooperate fully thereafter and had the blessing of the Shield Maiden who captured you that you be taken. And so you are taken, and you are branded on your shoulder with the mark of the cantons, and you are pushed off to the depths of the mountains, where you will spend years, in thrall into the dwarves of the Iron Crags as essentially their slave. But at least they'll treat you better than other places treat their slaves.
Absolutely.
And the amount of time they're going to keep you under the mountain, essentially a blink of an eye for you. So honestly, not too bad. You can just go collect later, right?
Yeah, I can go pick up my gold from my stash later on.
All right. And so, we'll flash forward again to Riordan. Now, the clash of weapons fills your ears. There's the taste of blood in your mouth, and you can see your family's soldiers pressing through the manor where the Blood King's elite guard are being driven back by the surprise attack by you and your allies. You can see the magics of the cult of the Red Goddess that have swayed to your side, holding back the elite of these vampire warriors. You know that your window is very small, but you know that you have a chance now. And you can see your mother, your father, Geniel, they are all fighting tooth and nail because this is your last chance to stop the Blood King before he drives this terrible war out towards the rest of to the rest of the nations. And you push your way into the main audience hall of the manor house where Lucan was touring, where he was visiting his various nobles and preparing them for war. And you see the Blood King himself in his black armor, seated in essentially a throne at the head of the room, and he is just staring calmly and impassively at the doors as you enter. Your soldiers surge in around you and immediately engage his personal guard. Between blade and magic, you manage to subdue them. And your father strides forward, his blooded sword at his side, an exultant smile on his face, hand in hand with your mother, as they move forward toward the king that this entire time has been silent. So where are you and what are you sort of doing at this point?
Yeah, I stride towards Lucan along with my mother and father as well.
All right.
And the intention being, as I have the rapier at my side, to all three of us execute him at the same moment.
Very well. So as you stride forward, certain that between the three of you, you can deal with this black mark on your nation's history and be sure to steer your kingdom in a positive direction, in a direction that will lead to life and growth and not death. He smiles, and those massive fangs in his waxy pallid skin and the black hair slicked and bound back, he cocks his head at you with these dark, almost dead eyes and says, "Interesting. You think you have won something today, do you not?"
This is the end of you and your rule.
"Come then, and end me." And he
Very well.
sort of leans back in his chair and holds out his arms.
I look at my parents for a moment, and then
They grimly nod and heft their weapons.
Yeah. I'm gonna thrust the rapier, just puncture it through his heart.
You lunge forward up the stairs, putting both hands on it, ready to punch this through this beast's heart, when you hit an invisible barrier that is like a solid wall. It's like running full tilt into stone. The wind is knocked out of you. Your parents come up short and try to press forward, but there's something holding you back. And in that moment, he smiles and snaps his fingers. An explosion rips through the dais in front of you. You and your parents are thrown into the air. Several of the soldiers, both Lucan's and your families, are caught in the blast, and you can see limbs and blood spray the walls. As you come to your senses, thrown back in the chamber, you see your parents struggling to their feet and dazedly looking for their weapons. Cain, you've been waiting. You've been waiting for this very moment. You heard too late. You knew this was a trap. You heard them talking. They thought you were loyal. But you heard just enough to know that the priests of the Red Goddess had betrayed your friend's family. and it weighed heavily on you knowing that you owed them from so long ago. They don't even really remember what their family did that was so profound for yours, and you know that you have seconds perhaps to make a difference and try to repay some of that debt. You're not sure you can save everyone, you're not sure you can save anyone, but you can at least try. You've been waiting in the wings in a side chamber near the audience hall, and as luck would have it, you can see that the young scion of the noble house is blasted by this horrible magic and thrown near to where you are standing. Thankfully, the guards nearby have been obliterated by being caught too close in that explosion.
Riordan is laying there, and Kane steps forth from the shadows. He doesn't draw his blade, he knows this battle is lost. But laying discarded on the floor is one of the shields from one of the fallen guards, which he takes and he slings it across his back to protect himself and his charge, and he pulls Riordan up with some effort, sort of bringing him close into sort of almost an embrace, and he tilts his neck to the side and pushes Riordan's lips against his neck. Doesn't give him any orders or command, just...
Riordan, your ears are ringing. All you can hear is just this high-pitched bell note that seems to be shaking through your bones, trying to shake them to pieces. Barely you come to your senses and realize that you're being hauled up by this... you know him. You know his name. He's Kane. He's an old friend of, as far as you know, your grandfather's. You've seen him a few times around the manor. You have no idea what he's doing here, and you have no idea why he's hauling you to your feet, but he is offering his throat to you, and you realize in that moment that you are on the verge of death.
Yeah, Kane? What are you doing here?
He just, holds the back of your head and stops you from speaking by just pressing you against, and there's sort of you can feel the pulse in his neck. It's steady. There's no fear there. There's no hesitation. The offering is...
No, it's almost like a reflex when he's this injured, and the fang's just going to come out and he's going to bite into the neck to draw some blood from it and gain...
Your fangs pierce flesh easily, and hot, vital, life-filled blood begins to roll past your tongue and pour down your throat. And you draw that life into yourself, and that at least stays the boatman's hand for now. You can feel your bones begin to knit, and what was most certainly internal bleeding begin to subside. It's still horribly painful, and that ringing in your ears begins to quiet. You look over with blood running down your chin, and you see your father desperately pulling himself up to his hands as the Blood King stands and sort of bored or tiredly rolls his shoulders. Your mother looks over at you without even looking up. She makes eye contact with you for one moment and then moves her hand in a very subtle gesture. There's a ripple in the air in front of you, and you can see now, as if looking through an image that isn't truly solid, of a stone wall and collapsed rubble blocking the doorway that Kane pulled you into. You can see through it, but it's like a ghostly image from your perspective of this collapsed column blocking the passage.
We must get my mother's father, Janelle.
He grabs you and sort of in your weakened state just sort of holds you against him, blocking his body between any attacks of opportunity that might come our way as he starts pushing you away down the stairs. Yeah, just dragging you away.
No.
From the shadows behind the throne, a figure steps forward, draped in white. And Lucan looks over toward the figure and nods once, and then looks out at the rest. The figure looks up, its hood kind of falls back a little bit, and you see the pale, emaciated flesh of a ghoul with great 2-inch long pointed teeth in its distended maw. Its tongue is long and sinuous like a snake's tail, and it just sort of flicks around its chin, and it lifts its claw-like hand and makes a gesture. As it does, there's this rumbling crack as spears of bone erupt out of the floor and impale every single person other than himself and Lucan in the audience chamber. The screams are immediate, and then most of them die. You see your mother and your father lifted perhaps 10 feet into the air as these spikes punch through their bodies and just lift them up. And Lucan says, "Take them to the roads. Impale them there for all to see, the price of their treachery and foolishness. And prepare the army." He sort of turns with a swirl of his cape and heads off in the other direction. And Kane desperately, perhaps against your protests, against your weak struggles, drags you down the side passage to a servant's entrance to try and sneak you out of the city before you're found.
Kane. Kane.
He turns.
What are you doing here? Why are you here?
He sort of looks you up and down at sort of the injuries and stuff. Probably sort of reaches down and just slides a small, what was probably part of a sword that has just been blown to pieces, like a sliver of metal from your skin. And he takes his arm round you and guides you away from the carnage.
All right. The sounds of the battle die down. The taste of blood is thick and heavy in your mouth, and you can just smell death behind you rolling out of the palace and the city surrounding it.
I look back with tears in my eyes and the flames from the fire being reflected in them, and Riordan will say, "Kane, we will return to this place. We will be back for them. I will not allow my parents and Janiel to go in such a way. We will return."
He looks
out
at the chaos, and as that happens, something circles from above and lands on his shoulder. And they exchange looks, and he nods solemnly, looking at the fire, and turns his back.
All right. Cloak.
Yeah.
It's been a few weeks. You've been watching the road. You've been awaiting your mother's return after she kissed you goodbye, and she took her wide-brimmed red hat with moss and acorn sprouts and little mushrooms growing upon it. And as she put it on, you could just sort of see that comforting veil that the caps create when one of your people places them on. And she told you to be good, listen to your father, and I'll be home with what we need before too long. And she kissed you on each cheek, and she trotted off down the road, as she's done several times before. It's been nearly 2 weeks now, and there's been no sign, no word. And now, every day you've come out and watched at the edge of the forest, the edge of the wormwood, never stepping so much as a toenail out beyond the edge of the wood itself. And in fact, you can hear the whispers when you approach the edge of the wood. Every day you wait and you get a little more impatient, and impatient grows to nervousness, and nervous is now growing into a pit of fear that's gnawing in your stomach. And as you wait, every day that rolls by, more people come and wait with you. You can see neighbors that you know. You see people you don't recognize. You see guards from the city watch that have come to the edge of the forest, and they're all watching the horizon expectantly, watching the road that comes over the hills, watching for some sign of your mother to return with what's going to save you all. Finally, on the 14th day after she's been gone, you see her. And for a moment, there's that little leaping joy. There she is. Finally, she's coming. What took her so long? But you see her staggering, running desperately, as hard and as fast as she can. And she is holding her arm, or rather what's left of it. As she gets closer, you can see that her arm, while it's still there, is withered and desiccated, and the flesh is pulled tight to the bone, and there's a great nasty gash along her bicep, and it seems like whatever this strange malady is, it is spread from that wound. And you notice with horror that she doesn't have her cap. And then you hear the hoofbeats. You're watching. It is perhaps, it's even before dawn. It's the sky has just begun to grow pinkish orange in the east, and you hear the hoofbeats, and a massive steed comes barreling around the corner. It's black, midnight black. Its eyes star-sparkling voids. The rider, likewise, clad in black, heavy plate armor that clanks with every powerful step of the horse. He has a shield strapped to one arm, black face with a strange new moon device upon it. You recognize something in the back of your mind prickles about this rider. As he runs, the clods of earth and dust that kick up behind the horse's hooves, they seem to stop and hang in the air, almost like a still photograph as the horse passes. You can hear your mother's panicked, wheezing breaths as she drives her body as fast as she can toward the wormwood, trying to evade what this just sable apparition of death behind her. And you hear your father, his hand clenches on your shoulder, and he says, "No, it's one of grandmother's horsemen." And at that point, all of the people around break and run. They drop what they're holding. A couple of the guards drop weapons. They toss shields, and they sprint as far and as fast as they can away from that Black Knight. Your father looks out and kind of screws his face up in this just awful expression, gives you one last squeeze on the shoulder, and you watch as your mother begins to run like those clods of earth behind her in this nightmare-like slow motion, like she's suddenly trying to run through thickened jelly. And the horseman draws closer with every hoofbeat. She is no longer able to outpace him. You can tell she is not going to make the edge of the wood. Your father...
Cloak's like holding out his hand. It's like, no!
You actually put your hand through the barrier, and you feel this cold waft by your arm and a whisper in your ear. Just strange words that you don't understand, but that make your spine turn to ice. And your father takes his hand off your shoulder, takes one deep breath, and draws his bow. With tears streaming down his face, he watches as his wife desperately tries to escape this thing, and she looks out at you, and he fires one arrow. You notice in that moment that the arrow shaft itself seems to be alive. Somehow, it has little buds, little twigs growing off of it. The arrow fires out and strikes your mother in the stomach. She lets out this, and as the arrow strikes, it slows down through, as if whatever effect is enveloping her takes the arrow with it as well. The arrow buries itself in her gut, and she collapses. In that instant, the horseman pulls up his horse, reins it in, and it begins to snort and prance and tear at the earth. And he starts looking around frantically, as if he can no longer see your mother's body crumpled not 5 feet away from him. He clashes his weapon against his shield and begins to ride right up to the edge of the wood, like barreling straight at you. And you snatch your hand back as he approaches, and he turns suddenly and just rides up and down the edge of the woods, searching. And you're powerless to just watch as your mother tries to slowly crawl her way toward the wood as the sky grows lighter and lighter and lighter. And as the first full rays of the sun peek over the hills, the light strikes the black horseman and he vanishes in black wisps of smoke. Your father drops his bow, tucks his red cap on, and runs out into the daylight. He scoops up your mother and brings her back inside the safety of the wormwood. When she's next to you, you can see that her arm, imagine that her arm had aged 100 years. Withered.
Okay.
Shriveled. Yeah. Your father takes one look at the wound and kind of sobs, but chokes it back. He strokes your head and says, "It's time to say goodbye."
I don't want to say goodbye.
Your mother weakly smiles with just a little trickle of blood at her mouth and reaches up and pats your cheek. And she says, "Listen to your father. Do what he says. I love you."
I love you too, Mom. I don't want to. I'm too young. No.
Oh. All right. So your father scoops your mother up as she slumps back against his chest and her eyes close, but you can hear she's still very weakly breathing. He runs and says, "Keep up, boy," and sprints back towards your home. You pass absolutely no one on the streets. It seems like absolutely everyone has gone inside, shuttered their windows, barred their doors, and doused every light. The entire city is dead. Forges are quiet. Home fires are snuffed. No one is even peeking out of their homes at this moment because grandmother's horseman was here. This is the closest any agent of the Baba Yaga has been to the wormwood of Nîmheim in hundreds of years. So your father rushes down into your workshop, into his workshop at the back of your house. He looks at the forge and then takes you to the cellar door nearby and takes you down into the basement. In there, you have been in here once or twice before. You know there's a strange shrine with odd, terrifying-looking figures that you've been able to discern are probably devils from the 11 Hells. He lays her body on the small altar, and laying over that is a red cloth that is growing with much of that wormwood foliage and acorn sprouts and mushrooms and moss that the red caps wear. He looks at her and he looks at you and he says, "There's no way to save her body now, but I can ensure that the devils don't have her soul. I'm sorry that I have to do this, but at least in this way she'll always be with us. I know you don't understand, but one day you will."
We can save her, though, right?
After a fashion, yes. He turns to the shrine and he begins to intone in the infernal tongue. You've heard this spoken a few times before when you were nearby one of the sacrifice rituals, one of the monthly observances that ensures that Baba Yaga and her agents won't be able to find your home, won't be able to find you, won't be able to track down any more of you, and she is searching for every single one of you, body and soul. So your father chants, and he draws out a little, just a tiny little knife, like a pocket knife, basically, one that you know that he forged himself. And as he chants, he desperately tries to keep his voice steady and not let the sobs break it. It looks like with all his might, he's just trying to keep his words strong, and he cuts across her throat. As her blood runs down, she lets one last breath out, and you can see a red mist sort of emerge from her mouth with that breath. And it swirls in this, almost like, think crimson cigarette smoke, these twisting little wisps that gather in a ball above her heart. And for a moment, you see her face in this just peaceful repose, just sort of blow by in the cloud. And then another face with a long pointed nose and these ears that sweep back and leering eyes and greedy claws reach out for it. And your father takes the knife, stabs it down through the cloud and into the cloth. The smoke swirls. The two faces blend together and are drawn down through the handle of his knife, past his hand that leaves it stained red as if it were wet with blood, and into the cloth, which begins to just flutter, just faintly around the corners.
What's going on?
He opens his hand, and you can see that red smear. It's almost like some kind of strange birthmark now on his palm as well as the back of his hand. He says, "She will now reside within this." And he sort of reverently lifts her body enough to take the cloak out, and he hands it to you. She is here, and she will protect you. You know how the hats work, yes?
Yeah.
This will work even better. She'll always be with you, and she'll watch over you. She'll protect you, because I'm not going to be here to do that either. And I'm sorry for that, but they're going to come for me. You know that they are. She came back empty-handed. If it wasn't her, better me than you.
No, they can't take you too.
They're going to take someone. You know it. They're not going to let the kingdom fall.
Why can't they take our neighbor Steve?
He pats your shoulder and says, "I'm sorry. That's not the way it works. I wish it were different, but it's not."
What about Bimblebot, Timmy? He's a dick.
Would that we could send him to the altar. He pulls you close and just kind of lets you blubber and babble and desperately try to offer other alternatives other than this. And as he does so, he just draws you out of the workshop, away from your mother's body, and you can feel the cloak, as you're kind of clutching at it, starts to wrap around you slowly, of its own accord. And it just settles over your shoulders. And for a moment, you take a deep breath, and you can smell her perfume wafting from the moss. This faint scent of lilacs that she loved so well.
Oh, no.
And your father draws you away from your home and towards your uncle's house. And he pounds on the door for probably 15 minutes until your uncle finally peeks out of a window to see who it is. And once he realizes it's safe, opens the door for you. He takes one look at you, one look at your father, and your father smiles sadly. Just his eyes are dead. They're just dead. And he shakes his head and says, "You're going to have to look after him." And he gives him this look that seems to have more meaning than you're really able to grasp right now. But your uncle, with his immaculately coiffed, very thin beard and little pencil mustache and little ringlet curl hair under his over his pointy ears, nods, and it looks like his eyes are starting to well up. And he says, "Come on, come along, boy. Come inside."
They can't take Dad.
Your father kneels down, turns you around, and gives you a huge hug and just crushes you to his chest.
No, they can't take you, Dad.
It's the way of things. I wish it wasn't. But if they don't take me, they'll take you.
No, I don't want to do this.
I'm so sorry. Keep her close, he says, and he sort of draws the cloak around you and strokes your cheek. Make her proud. You have so much more life to live than I do. This is for the best. And he you can tell he's trying not to let his voice quaver, but he kisses your forehead, and your uncle kind of grabs a hold of your shoulders and sort of hugs you back to him. And he said, and your father says, "I'm going to go now. I'm not going to let them come looking." And he sort of puts his hand behind your uncle's head, and they kind of touch their foreheads together for a moment, and your father just turns on his heel and runs off.
No, Dad! No!
Years later, you've grown. You were never allowed to attend that particular ceremony. Your uncle forbade it. You tried to go. He ended up having to hold you down. And in fact, the cloak wrapped itself around your wrists and ankles and just straight-jacketed you to the floor and wouldn't let you try to run in there and see or stop or interfere with the blood and soul sacrifice of your father that is offered up to the archdevils. Because it has to be done, and in time, Cloak might come to understand that, on some level at least, that if that weren't done, then all of you would fall beneath the blades of the horsemen, the claws and teeth of the Vila, the daughters of Baba Yaga, and maybe even the old grandmother witch herself. Gods forbid. So years pass, and your uncle keeps you in his home, keeps you safe, keeps you fed, and one night, when he is asleep upstairs, you can hear his snoring. It's raucous. You've gotten used to it at this point, but it never fails to shake the rafters. There's a fire dying in the fireplace down to low embers and the occasional spit of flame when there's someone behind you. The cloak seems to notice it first, and it tugs you.
Yeah?
You turn around, and there's an individual there in a black cape with a hood and a white mask, featureless except for faint eye holes. And the way the shadows of the mask fall, you really can't make anything out of the gnome standing in front of you behind that mask. He tilts its head to the side, holds out his hand. His, her, hard to say, their hand. Very just, identity is washed away by this cloak, loose-fitting garment, mask, gloves, the whole 9 yards. And there's a whisper that issues from this hollow, porcelain, flat, featureless face. Come with me, and I will see to it that you learn all you need to have your revenge. To protect you. To do what you will.
To kill grandmother.
The hollow voice laughs. You're an ambitious one.
She took everything.
Perhaps you can find a way. Others have tried. Others have thought they succeeded, and yet she remains. Come with me. I will teach you what we know.
Let's get going.
All right, so he takes your hand and he leads you to a place where there's a grove out in the woods. There is a faint little illusionary light wisping about that's just barely illuminating the circle of 9 other figures wearing various styles of cloak and clothing and mask. All of them are wearing masks. All of the masks are white. Some are stylized to look like leering devils. Some look like, one looks like a cute badger face. Several are featureless, and there is a single mask sitting in the center of the circle. None of the figures say or do anything. None of them lift a finger. They just barely turn to look at you. And the figure behind you stops you before you enter the light. He walks forward, picks up the mask, and turns around. And he leans forward and whispers to you, "We are the Nameless. Of our number, only I shall know who you are. When we meet, you will wear this." And he holds out the mask to you.
I take it and I then put on the mask.
Okay.
Looking at him.
It fits surprisingly well and easily, and is a little uncomfortable, but you hope in time you'll get used to that. And whenever you speak, your voice becomes strangely hollow as it issues out of the mask. And he says, "You will never know who I am. They will never know who you are. This is the way of things. This way we can't be forced to speak. This way we can't be forced to give account. And in this way, we shall discover the path to freedom." And so you're taken in. And once you are masked and cloaked, you're taken in before this group, and you learn that the Nameless are a society among the gnomes of Nimheim that have to operate in secret because they operate without the consent of the king. The king who seeks to heal the rift, the ancient rift with Baba Yaga, so that you will no longer need to sacrifice blood and souls to the devils every month. Which, on the surface, might sound like a reasonable goal, except he wants to get back into grandmother's good graces. And that seems to rankle every single one of these faceless, nameless individuals arrayed around you. And of course, it sets a fire alight in your heart. And so they teach you. They teach you to move unseen. They teach you to survive off the land. They teach you to hunt your quarry, how to know where it will go to ground, how to anticipate its next move, everything about it. And you begin to learn about everything they know of grandmother and her children and her minions, her demonic and fey minions. And you set out to learn what you can, knowing that your mother will protect you, wrapped tightly in the cloak around your shoulders. The mask will protect you from reprisals from your fellow gnomes of Nimheim. And you walk out of the wormwood for the first time in your life, out of the protection of the mystical bindings that save you from certain doom. You walk the roads of Midgard, and you find your way to the crossroads. Glaz.
Oh, yes.
It's been a strange day for you. You have been selling off your wares to the bottle makers, to the alchemists in the markets. You and your mother have had a tidy haul. You've had enough coin from this to feed yourself for probably the next week and a half. So you'll be able to rest easy for a few days, which is a welcome respite.
Yes.
So you and your mother are counting your coin, and she starts pointing out some of the food vendors that you might stop at for lunch.
Oh,
what do you feel like?
Can we get some noodles? I like the noodles.
I think
This
that
is me
sounds
young,
wonderful.
correct? We have,
Yes, you're younger, perhaps a young teenager.
yeah.
And he says, I think that sounds wonderful. Let us go find the best one. And so she draws you on, and you have a lovely afternoon picking your way through the market and spending your hard-earned coin, more than you've had in months, on some delicious, wholesome, tasty food that's going to fill your belly and just warms you from the tip of your ears to the claws on your toes. And so as you're sitting there on this bench overlooking kind of a scrubby little garden, but someone made an attempt. That's nice. Little park. You start to hear it again. You've heard it every now and then. It's a strange music, almost. Low, somber, deep notes. It reminds you of something you heard in one of the common houses in the nicer areas of town that you've passed through before. You never figured out what that instrument was that produced the sound, but you always thought it was lovely. And now you're hearing it again. You hear it every now and then. Sometimes on nights of the full moon, sometimes when you're traveling through the Ghostlight Forest from one place to another, searching for your bits and trinkets. It starts to grow louder than you've ever heard it before.
Yeah, I think Glaz is there, and here, in the sort of boardwalks of the swamps of the dire, the dire.
Fellmeyer.
Yes, and his feet sort of dangling off the edge of it, looking at this garden, attempt at a garden, and sort of cocks his head a little bit, and I think he probably starts to sway a little bit. His mother probably has gotten used to him doing this every once in a while, and his vision just sort of focuses in, and the world sort of just blurs, and he kind of feels himself almost drifting with the music, and he just says, it's louder tonight, but so nice. And soup.
She kind of leans in and she says, "Are you hitting it again?"
Yes. Yes, it is. It is loud this evening. Louder than ever.
Her brow kind of pinches together a little bit when you say louder than ever, and she says, Perhaps the matron was correct.
Do you think?
Maybe. And she smiles and passes you another roll for you to munch on as you listen to the music.
Nudge. Yeah, kind of gives her a nudge and goes, I think my special thing will be finding the right mushrooms on the right days.
Well,
that's my special. That's why I'm special.
She kind of pats your cheek, and so as this strange, kind of deep, beautiful string music is what it sounds like, sort of washes over you. It grows a little bit louder, and now you can hear it most distinctly coming from a direction, which you've really never heard quite so strongly before. Occasionally you'd hear the little faint strains of the music drawing you toward the best mushrooms in a patch and away from the deceptive poisonous ones. But this is altogether new.
Mother, it's over there today. It's
over there. She looks over, and you just kind of look down the street. There doesn't seem to be anything interesting or important there, but as you look, it's almost like someone changes the depth of field on you. Like without moving, your vision just sort of runs down the street, and the buildings sort of draw back a bit. And the music swells in that moment, and then you kind of come back to your senses.
His body, he just sort of, feels it almost as like it's rolling off of his back. And yes, it is. It's down the street, back the way we came from. The bottle market, maybe.
Well, she looks down at your lunch and says, "Well, why don't we follow it?
Okay.
It always leads you to the best mushrooms. Maybe it'll lead you to something good now, hey?"
Maybe fresh water. That always brings lots of good money here. And so he sort of slurps down his soup and gathers, his few things that he has, tools for harvesting, and
you have like a little rusty kind of bent trowel and a little spade, and
and let's go see. Perhaps more money we could get.
So you and your mother hop up, and she just sort of lets you lead the way, and you wander down the street, and you get a strange look from people occasionally as you sort of hum a little bit and sway, but to music that they can't hear, but nothing terrible. And as you draw back toward the bottle market, that music does indeed feel like it's drawing you along somehow, almost like the sound is flowing, and you're just sort of drifting along in the current.
And he probably is a strange sight. I mean, he hasn't gotten his full growth yet, but as most young Trollkin are, he is all, elbows and ankles and knees and, just sort of like, big feet and big hands. And, probably there's a little bit of him trying to a little bit flow with the music, feeling like he is, but he's kind of gawky and awkward, and there's probably a little bit of tripping that happens, and he closes his eyes some to try to follow it more. So he probably looks more like a drunken kid than necessarily someone following this flowing, beautiful, music of orchestral type music that only he can hear. He once in a while looks over his shoulder to make sure his mom's following him, and sort of gives her a smile that she's encouraging.
She smiles back, and she kind of tilts her head to the side, and she seems a little bemused, but yeah, she follows right behind you. And as you do, the music continues to just by tiny little notches grow a bit louder as you go on. And as you follow your way through the bottle market, and you hear the clink of glass almost seems to harmonize with this strange phantom cello music that you're following. And you hear the calls of merchants and barkers. It almost becomes lyrics to a song somehow. And for a moment, you can just kind of feel how everything in the bottle market is working in this strange, harmonious unison. From the wealthy merchants poking through, trying to get the very best deals and swindle some people out of some rare trinket that they have found along the way, to the boy trying to pickpocket the vendor on the corner there. Everything seems to be working towards some form of purpose.
And I think that there's this weird, almost subconscious thing that starts happening. He's never seen an orchestra or conductor, but there's this, as he closes his eyes, there's just sort of these little motions that start to happen with his hands, almost as though he is keeping time with this song that is just almost there, that yes. And he's sort of starting to mumble to himself and subconsciously conducting this.
As you move and speak along with this music, with this strange symphony of sound and action and life and commerce that's happening all around you, there is a sudden change in the feeling that's flowing through you. It suddenly feels electric. Like you're not only hearing the music, you can feel it. You can feel it just sort of thrumming through the cobblestones under your worn shoes. You can feel it vibrating your fingertips as you conduct this phantom symphony. And you open your eyes and you see suddenly this strange light pulsing along with the strains of the sound, flowing in this band or ribbon along the street with these little veins sort of pulsing out amongst the stalls. And then there's this crystallizing moment where the light all flashes into one solid color and the music crescendos, and your attention is drawn to three individuals in various colored robes. They're standing sort of in a triangle facing one another. Their heads are down. Their hands are folded in these strange gestures, and everyone just sort of gasps, and they're all looking down at the ground, and you realize that your mother is staring at the light too.
Yeah, and I think
the three look up as one and look at you.
And I think, as he sees the light, he kind of puts his hands out. He was sort of doing this weird, and then it just sort of, does this kind of motion and sees the light, and then kind of looks up.
When you put your hands down at the light, there's a sudden ripple through the ground. The cobblestones, it's like someone took the street and snapped it. And everyone around you sort of gasps and looks around like, whoa, what the hell just happened? And the three individuals in robes just all tilt their head at the same time and start walking forward. Your mother has her hands pressed to her mouth, as clearly she just saw that too, and she says, Glass, are you all right?
Yes, it was beautiful. It was.
You're okay? That didn't hurt you?
I'm not even sure if it was me, but it was.
So at that moment, she notices the three figures approaching you, and you kind of have your attention drawn back to them as well.
I kind of look up, and I assume, again, he's probably about their height, unless they're super tall, even though he's still sort of just
probably about their height,
yeah, and kind of looks up at them, and seeing these very well-dressed people, which in general in his life up to this point has meant either he was in trouble or he was amongst his betters and probably should not be seen, and that they're paying so much. And after this has just happened, he's just, I can explain. I'm so sorry. I do not know. I'm and he kind of folds his arms and hello. I'm Glass. Glazishin, but you can call me Glaz. Everyone calls me Glaz. And just kind of very nervously just tries to do something to feel...
So the three approach you. One of them is a human. The other is something with some sort of fiendish blood. You've seen them before. You really don't know terribly much about them, but he has these horns swept back in front of his from the front of his forehead, and there's this faint smell of brimstone about him, and his skin has sort of a purplish red tinge, and his eyes are black, and he smiles and seems, I don't know, it's half creepy, half inviting. Very strange. The other one, at first glance, looks human, and then you notice just a very slight point to the ears and a very delicate cast to the features. You realize this person is in fact elf-marked. So this is perhaps once a person who earned the favor of the elves, or perhaps whose family line carries some blessing of the lost elves. And the human in front bows his head both to you and your mother, and he says, "Good afternoon. My name is Malkut Ebenstaff."
He doesn't know what to do, so he just kind of, I think he does, like, goes to bow, and then the only thing that he's ever seen people do is his mom one time curtsied, so then he kind of like curtsies, and he's like
and she kind of says, no, just she kind of stops you from doing that and says, no, it's fine.
Yeah.
And he so he smiles a bit and says, "What is your name?"
I'm Glaz. It is nice to meet you.
Glaz.
Hello.
I am surprised and delighted to make your acquaintance today.
He kind of looks.
You are, and he looks to your mother, and she kind of, oh yes, this is my son. And he bows even a little bit lower to her and says, "Madam, I wonder if I might beg a few moments of yours and your son's time. It seems we have a very important proposition to put forward to you." And so thus begins a very strange conversation of which Glaz understands very little, but the three who come to tell you that they are wizards from the city of Bemia, which of course you have heard of, you've never been to because it's out in the middle of the ocean, and as far as you know, only wizards can go there. They can open the way. They explain to you that what you heard and what you saw is incredibly rare and marks you as very special. And if you and your mother would like, they can take you to one of the colleges in Bemia and teach you to learn more about this. And over the course of this discussion, it becomes clear that they explain to you that no, you are touched and possess the capacity to manipulate and control the forces of magic. If you wish, with study and dedication, you can become a wizard.
I think
your mother claps her hands to her mouth and just sort of looks at you.
It's funny. He does almost the exact same expression, having seen her before. Just
yep.
And I look to her, and I look to them, and I was basically just. So, that music. That is magic.
That is a very special kind of magic. You see, all across the face of the world, there are rivers of magic if one knows where to look, and if one is gifted enough to see it, or apparently in your case, hear it. If you wish, you can learn to tap into this magic, to draw it, and bend it to your will.
To play the music.
Yes. Yes, amongst nearly anything else you can imagine.
I look to my mother.
She looks equal parts scared and excited.
Yeah, and it's, he's, again, probably about her same height as well. Her human features, very different from his own, and his, sort of tusks from his trollkin nature, and the his long ears. And he kind of smiles at her and goes, maybe the matron was right.
I think she was. Do you want to do this?
Well, I don't necessarily want to leave, but Mother, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. It calls to me. I think it's always called to me.
Her eyes well up a little bit, but she smiles and she says, then I think you should go with them.
I look to them and go, I know Bimia is a very special place and it's not close by, but will I be able to at least visit every once in a while to come back?
The elf-marked individual chuckles softly and says, but of course, you will have much study. It will occupy a great deal of your time, but it is not a prison. Of course you can come visit.
Then a big, toothy grin, and but he kind of laughs and goes, well, I do know the best place to come and find my potions when I need them, I guess. Right, Mom?
She laughs and a tear rolls down her cheek and she says, yes, soon you'll be making the best potions.
Maybe. I guess we will see. As you say, who knows what the next dawn will bring. And he just gives her a big hug.
She hugs you back, and she, gathers up as much of your things as you have. Basically, the wizards say, no, that's not necessary. Everything you need will be provided to you, unless you have some personal effects you wish to take, some personal mementos.
I think just probably, in their travels, he has probably one or two little trinkets that that he has.
In fact, your mother takes off a bracelet. It's just kind of a simple cord with a little rough agate, and it's one that you found the first time you heard the music and found a mushroom patch. And you picked that up amongst them, and she presses it on your wrist and says, "Here, take this."
And I do the same thing. I have a little necklace that has that was a shell that just sort of has a maybe a little shiny shell, and I take it off and I put it on her and I go, I keep watch over everyone. Make sure they find the best mushrooms.
I'll try to remember what you taught me.
Yes.
And so you say your goodbyes. She hugs you tight and kisses your face, and the mages whisk you away. And you are taken to the city of Bemia, which is unlike anything you have ever seen before. And as soon as you step foot in it, you just hear music. It takes you a while to get used to it and drown it out. Every street, every alley, every building, archway, spire, all of it seems to gather and amplify this music that you can hear. And you learn over the course of your studies that Bemia is an artificial anchor for two of the most powerful ley lines in all of Midgard. And you see a map of the city, and it is essentially a giant anchoring glyph built into the buildings and streets. And I'll offer this up to the stream there. This is the city of Bemia. So you can see that is the layout of the streets and the buildings, and the entire place is just built to channel and magnify and manipulate magic. So you begin your studies. It's very difficult at first. You've never had formal education before, and you're kicked in at kind of an advanced level. And at first, you end up struggling hard. And you have some fellow students who take great pains to remind you that you're struggling hard. But that manages to basically just bolster your resolve and causes you to double down on your studies, and you make swift progress. And then one night, after you're looking over the collections from your recent fieldwork, where you went and worked on an archaeological digging up ancient artifacts of the empire that once sunk into the sea here, the first great human empire on Midgard, you hear that sound again. A swell of music, but this time tempered with something else. A strange drum beat pulling at you. And it wakes you out of your doze where you were falling asleep on your textbooks.
He he wakes up and immediately recognizing that this is something different. And just as last time, that a new sound has led him places, and he gets up and just, there's something new, and gathers his things together and just begins to start listening and almost letting the music take him. And again, probably now it's been years. He's sort of got his full growth, and probably is a strange sight to see it, almost 7 feet tall, the only trollkin in Bimia. He begins, still not the most graceful thing in the world, but he's closing his eyes and sort of is following along. Where are you coming from? Where?
So you walk the city streets at night, and it's mostly quiet, although there are some parts of the street that come alive at night. For whatever reason, certain stores only sell their wares after dark. Very strange. Many strange customs and even laws in Bemia, but you get used to it. You follow the music, and when you look up, you realize you are in the dead center of the city. And you're looking down at this intricate tile mosaic that covers this open square. And you've seen it many times. You've studied it. You've copied drawings of it. You've taken rubbings of the tiles, and you can easily recount and visualize various sections of it. And you know that it's called the Labyrinth. It's a great twisting path of color in the very center of the city. And you know that it is said that wonderful things can happen if one knows the proper paths to walk and take along the labyrinth. And you can feel the music thrumming beneath your feet, and you can hear the glass tiles sort of reverberating with the song of the ley lines.
So Glaz just closes his eyes and begins to conduct or feel the music, and then puts his hands down and just without his eyes open lets the music take him into the labyrinth.
All right. So he just walks, and you walk a twisting, strange path that if you were hard-pressed, if your life depended on it, you probably couldn't recreate it outside of that sort of almost trance state that you've entered into. And as you walk, the music grows louder, and you can smell almost this electric charge filling the air. And you can feel this energy thrumming through your feet and crackling off your fingertips. And occasionally, as you do your little conductive movements, you can feel bolts of energy and even see flashes of light behind your eyelids passing from hand to hand. You continue to walk this strange path that this drumming and this cello music that you hear is drawing you along. And as you do, you start to feel strange and disoriented, almost like half of your body is taller or longer than the other. And then that's gone. And then for a moment, you're ice cold and then feverish hot and break out into sweat. And then your footsteps crunch, not on glass tile, but on gravel or twigs or dead leaves. And you tilt your head to the side, and the song of the ley lines is all but gone. You can hear something. It's faint, it's distant, but it's not the same. It sounds more like a reedy woodwind off in the distance.
He opens his eyes.
You open your eyes, and you're standing in a dark forest glade. You're looking at the trunk of a tree that you would almost guess is an oak tree, except it sort of twists, almost like taffy, in the middle, and the branches are sort of leaning towards you with these grayish and black leaves. And you look around, and there's all manner of similar trees like that, just thick and dense. And up above you is a roiling charcoal gray sky, just a smear. No moon, no stars.
Yeah, from Glaz's studies. The Shadow Realm.
Yes.
Oh,
yes, you recognize it immediately. And your blood begins to run cold. And in that moment, you feel something cold tap under your chin. And you look, and you see a dull gleam of metal coming from the blade of a sword. And holding it is a very delicate hand with nails like cat claws. Black-clad armor.
Hello. I'm lost, and I did not mean to intrude or come to this place unintentionally. I am just trying. I was following the. Did you hear the music? This is not good. If you and just sort of starts to stutter and stammer as he looks down.
Right, and so there we will cut away from Glaz, and I think I need to check in. Are we coming up on end of time here,
I
or
think we can do this scene.
what's that?
I
What'd
think
you
we can do the scene with Carrie.
I would like to do carries if we could. I know people might have time issues, so it's up to you guys. If you guys are good to go, I'm good to dive into the last of background intro.
She needs to suffer.
I want to hear her backstory.
Right? I'm so invested.
You know, I feel like we might have gotten most of the suffering out of the way already. Sorry, fellas.
I'm scared.
All right.
Take from her.
Kari, you're running through the woods. Your bare feet are snapping on twigs and occasionally catching on roots, but you've got great balance. It doesn't really stumble you up very much. You catch yourself if you have to dig your fingertips into the loam and then just kind of drive yourself forward again. And as the cold air whistles through your hair and pull it through your nose into your lungs, running through this strange, gloomy, dappled glade, you've never felt happier. And you look down and you kind of run to a stop, and you look at sort of your bramble-torn leggings and the dirt and mud stuck between your toes, and you just sort of giggle for a moment, and then you look around the forest where you find yourself. And how do you feel in that moment?
I just feel the rush and then sensation of being alone. I'd often find myself running away from my family or from Hunt's Reach just so I can feel the call of the wild.
Right. And so in that moment, you take a deep breath and you open your eyes and you sort of snap back to yourself where you are now. Your armor's weighing a little heavily on your shoulders, but it's a nice night. Most of them are nice. And you allow yourself that moment of remembering when you used to run through the woods as a child, back before you had any of your training, back before you took up your posts at Hunt's Retreat, before you trained with the forest hunters for a while at the Sable Court. And you just smile, remembering those days. And it feels good to know that even now, with everything else, there's still a little bit of that with you. And you set off into the woods again. And you've been out here for perhaps a few days, living off the land, striking out into the Forest of the Firebirds, not really searching for anything in particular. You thought perhaps if you could find one of the steel-winged, swan-like Ayala, you might be able to trap it, and maybe you've heard that the Queen of Night and Magic enjoys these birds, and perhaps if you could present one to the court as a gift, they might look kindly upon that. But they're also said to breathe fire, and that the steel feathers of their wings are razor sharp. So maybe you're not looking too terribly hard just yet.
It's a nice fantasy, though.
It is. It's a nice idea. As you make your way through the woods, you have the reassuring tug of your bowstring slung over your shoulder and the soft clatter of your sword against your hip. You stop as suddenly the back of your neck prickles. You look around and you know it. You're being watched. Just instinctually, it's just somewhere. You know it.
Since it's dark, I attempt to use my ability to Misty Step away as Shadow Fae can and try and hide myself again.
Okay, you step into the shadow of one of the trees and you whisk yourself through the stuff of darkness into a nearby shadow. And you have a good vantage point actually up into the crook of a tree. And you have a good vantage point crouching there to see the clearing where you were running through and looking for whatever it is that prickled your intuition, that tickled your senses. And for a moment, you think maybe it was your imagination, but then you see a dark shape move off in the trees. You watch,
Hi.
and it's just sort of there for a moment and then gone, but you think you have a gauge of the direction it was moving.
Can I attempt to move through the trees, kind of over top of it, kind of Avatar
Sure.
style?
Yeah, the canopy is dense enough here that you can kind of brachiate and kind of go from one branch to the next. It's not super fast, but you don't need to be. And you can do it relatively quietly, given the dense canopy here. So you start to make your way among these thick, twisted tree branches. Occasionally one of them seems to like pluck at your boot, but you just sort of kick it aside. And following along with the direction where you saw this shadow go, you see a bit of like a scratch or a tear in the ground where something tore at the loam or disturbed the leaf litter.
Would I recognize the tracks at all, or at least
If
get a
you get a
gauge
little
of
bit
how
closer.
large the creature was?
Yeah, if you get a little bit closer, you can check it out.
Okay, I will try to, as silently as I can, swing down, staying close to the trunk of a tree, instead of just like superhero jumping off.
Right. So you slink down the tree trunk and creep your way out toward the mark. And you look at it, and there's a print nearby, and then there's that mark. And gauging between the print and then this claw mark that doesn't quite match it, it's some kind of a large cat.
I take a look around to see if I'm being stalked right now. Still.
That's a good instinct, because as you whip around in the direction you saw it moving from, there is a twin pinpoint bluish-white gleam in the brush.
I crouch down and I move my hand towards my sword, but I don't really try to make a run for it.
All right. So knowing that a lot of these creatures, their instinct is to chase, and if you turn your back on them and try to run, they'll pounce on you, and if they drive you to the ground, you're as good as dead. You stand your ground, maybe shift back just a little bit, and move your hand to your weapon. As you do, the eyes swing over toward to look at your hand, and then back up again. And the creature takes one soft step forward, and a massive black furred cat. Essentially, think of it like a giant panther, and its fur seems to just absorb any mote of the dim light that fills the twilight gloom of the Shadow Realm, and it steps without so much as a whisper. You're not even sure how you managed to notice its presence before, given how carefully and stealthily it moves. And it sort of lifts its head, and its ears are laid back, but then they kind of prick forward towards you.
I would say not overly familiar with the language of animals, but familiar enough to know that if it could strike, it probably would. And I'd go to test the theory, and I move my hand slowly away from my blade, keeping my palms outstretched.
As you move your hand away from your sword, it darts forward about half of its body length, which brings it uncomfortably close to you. Its ears lay back, and it growls.
I growl back
And
at
its
it
claws
right
dig at
away
the
as
earth.
soon as it comes close to me.
As soon as you growl and sort of threaten and reach back for your weapon, it takes a step back.
I really do not want to go head to head with this thing, and I just kind of mimic its actions, trying to make myself a little bit bigger and growling and taking tenacious steps towards it.
All right, so as you start to, it sort of bunches itself backward onto its hind feet. Its tail lashes twice and then goes still, and it crouches low, locks its eyes with you, and gives this sort of horrible great cat hunting cry, and lunges at you. Just throws itself across the clearing. What do you do?
Oh man, I am going to try and just step out of the way and turn so I can get behind it, and I will draw my sword as I do so.
Okay, so you're trying to sort of, as you defend and draw, you pull the blade out, and you realize as you're drawing, you have a perfect strike at its underbelly.
It seems that is the way of nature, to kill or be killed. And yet something in my heart tells me to hesitate, and I move aside.
As soon as you hesitate, it twists almost impossibly in the air and rakes a claw across your face, poof, and sort of knocks you down to one knee and lands in the dirt and stares at you again.
All right. Let's do this.
And it bares its yellowed fangs and lunges again, and you can see this blue light gleaming in its eyes.
There's
its
no
jaws
longer
driving
any
right through
holding
your
back
throat.
for Kari, and she is fully engaged in every way that she can be, going now
All right.
for the kill.
So as this thing lunges forward, you can see it's going for your throat. So you drop low, drive the short sword up into its chest. It lets out this yowl of pain and just bursts into these shards of shadow and is gone. But then you hear this breeze sort of blows through and rattles all of the trees, and you hear
Looking around.
So as soon as that happens, you have this feeling sort of settle over you, like this triumphant, this exultant feeling, but also a feeling of this presence that almost fills you, and it is wonderful. It feels like you're not alone.
I feel the surge of energy, and I let it flow through my veins, and just let it enrapture me like a drug in and of itself. The feel of the hunt completely taking me over, making me near bloodthirsty.
All right, and as you do, you catch scent of an animal on the wind.
I head off in the direction now, giving to my baser urges the need for the hunt, the need to chase, the need to go on.
As soon as you set off in search of whatever creature is out there in the woods, that exultant feeling starts to flow through you again, but in a very directed, sort of channeled way that seems to be driving you on farther into the woods. And you will spend probably the next 3 days just completely consumed with the hunt, tracking your prey, killing it, eating it, tanning its hides, making shelters out of the remains if you can, using the bones and hides to make shelters, living off of the land just fully. And you have never been more at home when you are out in the wilderness on your little training exercises like this. And as the days roll on, that feeling of not being alone stays with you.
I try at different points throughout the different camps of the night to try communicating or calling out or seeing if I can see something like the cat hunting me. I try to never sleep on the ground at that point, always up in the trees if I can help it. I don't feel alone, so I'm going to trust my instinct on that.
Right, and that feeling of not being alone, it's not that sort of oppressive someone's watching you, it's this comforting, it feels like there's a partner at your back sort of deal.
Okay.
And it's strange, you're not sure where it's coming from, but it very much it just feels right. And so you spend several days, practicing your hunt, and eventually it comes time that you really need to head back towards Hunt's Retreat or some other vestige of civilization. And even as you do, you still carry that feeling with you, like you're not leaving anything behind anymore, as you sometimes felt whenever you'd have to tear yourself away from the woods and head back to see to your duties.
It's still painful to leave the forest. The closer I get to civilization, the kind of slower my running becomes, the heavier my feet fall. Lifted by the fact that I'm no longer alone in my travels, that there is something in me that is connected to the rest of the world around me.
Right. And
I still
as you
sing
move,
a song of lament as I get closer.
okay. As you move through the woods and you make your way toward Hunt's retreat, you feel almost drawn to it in a way that you really never have before. It's always felt like you said, like a lament when you had to come here, but something's different now. And you're having trouble putting your finger on it, but you can hear sounds sort of echoing through the forest as you get closer and closer to the lodge. You can hear voices raised, and they sound jubilant. The sounds of merriment.
Is the Dark Prince here? I pick up my pace.
Your pace quickens, and you head in, and you see a great number of shadow-faced steeds being drawn into the small stable at the back of at Hunt's retreat, and you can see that there are fires built in the sort of the lawn area surrounding it, and you can see pavilions being set up as well as some supplies being brought into the lodge, and you see the black pennant of the Black Prince. Yes, indeed, you do.
Oh, that's so exciting. I am still fairly uncouth as Shadow Fago, so I slink around the outskirts of the parties as I want to do, and try to pick up bits and pieces of conversation and be a part of the merriment without so much really being a part of it.
Sure. So you're able to pick up very quickly and easily. I mean, you don't have to. You don't have to slink around terribly much. You're more than welcome here. This is your place. No one gives you a second glance. You get a few, polite nods of greeting when people notice you. You very quickly pick up that the prince has been out on a short hunt and has been successful, and so they are setting up their camp to celebrate and to divide and share the hunt's spoils. And you likely have come back not empty-handed yourself, since you've been out hunting for days. You probably have some fresh kill that you were planning to eat for the next few days.
I would have taken it back to my family's kind of small lodgings and set it up there, and maybe talked to them and said, how long has the prince been here, and getting little bits of information.
Okay, so nearby there's a strange individual. You've seen a few of them before, sometimes in the employ of the prince, sometimes in service to other Shadow Fae nobility. It's a young man, and he's wearing a black velvet tabard with the prince's livery on it, and he has a sword belted at his hip, and he's very pale. His hair is almost like ghostly blonde, and he seems to be immortal, a human, which is maybe a little strange, but you've seen some of these servant types before, and you know that they're referred to as dream squires. And he turns towards you and bows very low, and he says in a very level, even voice, "Mistress, how may I be of service to you?"
Forgive me, it is not often that I see your kind. You are a curiosity to me.
Yes, I understand that there are fewer of myself now than there have been in the past. And he sort of weakly smiles, and then it just sort of fades away.
I do my best to smile back at him and not have it be eerie, but my intentions are not to make him feel uncomfortable. Sure. So
he doesn't look uncomfortable at all. He looks perfectly attentive to you, your presence, and anything you might have to say.
Are you here for the hunt?
Yes, we have returned from the hunt. The Black Prince has been successful.
That is wonderful.
Three boars fell before his spear and arrows.
It's most impressive.
I see that you have brought kill.
Yes, and some other unusual experiences along the way.
That does tend to happen in the forest, one understands. If you would like, you can bring your kill to share. And he sort of gestures toward the camp that's being set up. Sorry, say again.
I would very much enjoy that. And she would take her kills kind of slung over her shoulder in casual fashion.
So the squire offers to take it from you.
I hand it over.
He takes it, and he sort of waits and just follows along next to you toward where the kills are being dressed out. And so, yeah, he just takes you in there, and he begins to essentially, if you ask him for any assistance, he sees to your needs. He will begin dressing your deer if you wish him to, and he basically just kind of buttles around, handling whatever you need as you just sort of get swept up in all of the festivities happening here, the prep. You see a few of the other Shadow Fae who are very clearly from the courts themselves. You can tell they almost play act, putting on their hunting clothes and their armor and such. But they have just a flavor about them that's just off. So they kind of smile at you like, yes, hello, fellow hunter. And you kind of, there's a little pang of disdain for them.
Yeah, I just give a curt nod of my head. Or anything to defer to their station, but they are glamorous, Takari.
Sure. So after not very much longer at all, the fires are roaring, animals are spitted and begin roasting on the flames, and you can smell just this marvelous aroma coming off of the various boars and deer and rabbits that were caught in the wood. And music and wine and merriment begins, and there is some dancing and singing, and tales are being told, and you can see the Black Prince himself is seated in a chair near one of the larger fire pits, and he's leaning back listening to a story, and it looks like he's enjoying himself.
I try to get a little bit closer.
Sure. So you kind of sidle up, and as you do, a horn sounds in the distance, and then the braying of hounds. And the music sort of dies down a little bit, and the Black Prince sits up and looks off toward the wood where the sound came from. After a few moments, that baying of hounds grows louder and louder, and you can hear thunderous hoofbeats and the sound of people running through the brush. A figure very soon bursts through the tree line, riding a magnificent horse that seems almost greenish and spectral, like you can see through it, and it leaves this wispy trail behind it. He's wearing tanned hides and leathers. He has a crown of antlers that bursts up from his forehead, and a sort of greenish glow fills from his eyes and obscures the features on his face. And he has a spear raised high in one hand that has luminous green vines curling around it, and he charges through the clearing, and Shadow Fae scatter to get out of his way, and he pulls up his horse, and it rears and just sort of whinnies out this bizarre echoing cry that almost sounds like a horse, but not quite. That ain't a normal horse. And he sets the steed back down and settles into its saddle, and looks at the Black Prince, and the Black Prince stands and bows his head respectfully. Every other Shadow Fae bows at the waist, like eyes to the ground.
I do as well, because that's the Lord of the Hunt. Yes,
it is.
I bow.
He nods his head toward the prince and just sort of ignores everyone else, and he trots his horse forward a bit, and he takes a string of rabbits off of the tie on his saddle, and he looks toward a tree. Next to it, there's this hollow in its trunk, and it looks like there's some kind of something laid out there, like maybe there's a shelf or a kind of a floor in this hollowed trunk that's sort of bowed out from the tree. He bows his head slightly to it, tosses the rabbits onto it, wheels his horse, and charges off back into the woods.
I turn my eyes to the Black Prince to see if he is going to make a motion over towards that tree trunk.
He sort of looks at it, kind of nods, and then just sort of goes back to his business. And the rest of the Shadow Fae around, they're just abuzz with what just happened. And so they're tittering and gossiping and talking about who the Lord of the Hunt looked at, and
Sorry. A dramatic eye roll is very much so Kari as well. And she goes over to the tree trunk, surprised that the Black Prince either didn't notice or was too enamored of the Lord of the Hunt is how she's going to ration it out, and is going to head over to that string of rabbits.
Okay, so the tree, it looks like it's been hollowed out at its base, or maybe it strangely grew that way somehow, except it looks too deliberate. Maybe someone carved and polished it. There is a slightly bowed, almost like an altar set up there that the rabbits are thrown onto, and the wood is thickly stained with old blood. And there is a symbol carved into the back on the inside of the tree, and it looks like a spear point. And as you look at that, it almost glows blue and sort of jumps out at you, and you feel this visceral connection to it.
I reach out a hand and just kind of touch along it gently.
Okay, so as you touch it, this sort of cold shock runs up your arm, and you hear that whispering voice when you struck at the great panther, when you slew it. You hear that voice just sort of whisper, "Welcome home." And whatever that presence, that feeling in you is, you have this connection to this altar and this symbol.
Hello.
And so, after making this discovery and learning that she has this connection, Kari very quickly comes to realize that she has been chosen by the hunter. And she very quickly, after that, comes to realize that with that comes power, as well as expectation, which she meets eagerly, because the hunter wants her to hunt. He wants her to kill. He wants her to find prey and spill its blood. He wants her to live off its meat. He wants her to make utensils from their bones and horns, to take trophies, to be the best predator that she can. And that, in doing so, glorifies him. And in return, he grants you a measure of his power. And over time, that divine connection grows, and you realize that you can whisper a prayer or a desire to him, and he will grant it. You can mend your wounds. You can strike down your enemies. You can forge. You can borrow his claws to strike down your enemies if you need.
I spend many days in hunt in honor of that after I first discovered these powers and the altar, and I let the cacophony of the festivities, they don't mean anything to me at this point. The jubilant parties and everything that Kari had so previously got wrapped up in, she really feels the pull to her true calling to be out there in the wild again.
All right. And so time will pass, and she will grow more confident in her understanding of the entity that she now knows is the hunter. This dark god of bloodshed and predators and the death of prey. And she meets other worshippers of him, among the hunters of the Shadow Fae and among just other adherents. And some of them take it to a pretty ridiculous extreme, a point that she might see as excessive and wasteful. That is one thing that Kari is not, is wasteful. There's no point in killing just to kill. And so some of these more zealous devotees of the hunter might put her off, and she may eschew some of their company once she realizes how bloodthirsty some of these people are, because they start to see everything and everyone as prey. But over time, she grows much more comfortable with this connection and this presence, this ever-present presence that now you know is the hunter, just sort of always with you. And one night, you are out in the woods on one of your excursions, sleeping in a tree so easily as you do. Your newly acquired Fey spirit familiar curled up at your side, warm against your hip. You drift off to sleep, and you find yourself somewhere else, somewhere you've never seen before. You look down at the ground, and it's gray and rocky, and there are strange rents, large fissures in the ground, and foul-smelling tar or some kind of substance seems to seep up out of the earth and just belch this terrible stench into the area. You look around and the sky is bright, piercingly bright and stabbing at your eyes, even though there are thick clouds and what seem to be swirling storms of ash and dust. But this is very much not your home, because the sun is burning up above there, trying to stab through the ashes and strike at you. And you look around, trying to get your bearings, and you realize that this place feels dead. You're so normally in tune with these the natural wilds that this place just tastes rotten. It smells foul, and you look around, and your skin begins to prickle into goose flesh, just feeling how dead this land is. You don't see a single plant, you don't see a single animal, not a bird, not a beast. And then you hear a great rumbling impact. You spin around and you find yourself staring up at some sort of thing that has just taken a step. It stretches up into the sky and blots out what would be the sun. It is vaguely humanoid in shape, but you find yourself having difficulty really focusing in on its details. It stands there in the wake and the aftershocks of this massive step it took, and you can see what look like massive chains sunk into its back and draping back into the land, and what look like large almost sleds or skiffs with huts on them being dragged behind this immense creature, and lumberously it takes another step. And the foot just sort of slowly sweeps and then drives itself down into the dead ground. And as it goes, those chains drag this strange village behind this creature. Protruding from its back are these misshapen bat wings, and its limbs gnarl and twist, and its face is this sprouting mass of what looks like tentacles of rotting gray flesh. And as you look at it, you kind of flinch away. It's almost like its very presence stabs at your soul.
This whole situation is just vile. There is nothing natural about this. Why wouldn't you just kill the beast instead of putting it through this awful subservience? I don't understand.
Well, whatever it is, it's hundreds of feet tall. And as you watch, there's this swirl of nasty dust and mist that kicks up around you in this wind out of nowhere. And the next thing you find yourself in a different place, standing atop another creature that sort of reminds you of that in some ways, certainly in its stature, in the immense feeling of its wrongness, that the world itself is trying desperately to reject this thing, but can't. And now you're standing on top of it, and your feet are beginning to almost feeling like they blister, trying to get away from this thing. And you see in front of you, standing on the creature, perhaps 20 feet away with you, is a figure in a fluttering, like dirty gray linen robe. And in one hand, you can see these scarified glyphs. And around each glyph, the skin is black and puckered, almost like these things are rotting into its flesh. It cocks its head to the side, almost like it heard you or was aware of your presence for the moment, and this kind of like a headscarf covering the back of it just flutters in the wind, but it doesn't turn around. It turns its back to you again, reaches in front of it, and draws out this massive black dagger that seems to have almost a cruciform blade, like it's two dagger blades stuck together, making like a plus if you looked at it straight on. And it drives this dagger into the creature's chest and starts sawing a hole in it. And this sound, this bass rumble from this strange otherworldly thing that you're standing on just rips out and causes earthquakes, mountains to crumble in the distance. You can see flames and lava boil up out of the earth as this figure starts carving into its chest and rips out what is a dripping black, massive, probably tiny based on the size of this creature's body, but massive compared to the person ripping it out, crystalline black heart. And the figure throws its head back in triumph and howls in some language that you don't understand, but you hope to all the gods that you never hear again. As he speaks or screams, your lip splits, blood pours out of your nose, and it feels like you were punched in the stomach just from hearing this word. And the heart begins to shrink down to about the size of a human heart. And then everything goes black. And you start awake in your tree perch. And you go up and you touch your hand to your lip and you pull away blood.
I wipe away the blood and I try to commit to memory what I had just seen, thinking that I should share this with my people.
Okay, so as you desperately try to recall these details, the edges of them start to slip away, as so often happens when you wake from a dream. Certain things, though, are burned into your memory. The look of those massive silhouettes, those creatures, the one lumbering across the land and the other dying beneath this strange knife. The look of those scarred images in the creature's arm, and the sound of that word that it screamed into the dying sky. You're not sure that you'll ever be able to forget the sound of that word.
I couldn't remember the word at all.
You try, and it's almost like it nauseates you trying to recall the exact sounds of it. So maybe you could with time, or maybe you could try to write down roughly what it sounded like. Something along those lines, but trying in this very moment, you're
right
incredibly
now,
shook. You're incredibly shook, yeah. Your familiar, your familiar is up on on his toes. His tail is puffed out, and he's kind of arched up, like he's threat displaying, trying to make himself bigger. And that's when you see a flash of light. This, like, sudden, swift, bluish white, almost like a beam, across your vision in the forest.
I will go along the edges of whatever consumable trail or road and head up to see what this flash of light is, thinking that it must be tied to what I've just experienced.
All right, so suddenly very thankful to have something to pull your mind out of that horrific nightmare and into reality, the moment, the air and the soil and the trees around you. So you are very certain that what you just experienced was some sort of manifestation of a road, a shadow road. But that one doesn't look or feel like any of them you've ever seen before. And certainly there isn't one that runs through this area. You're positive of that. So that's very strange.
I'm gonna climb up the trees then, and walk if there is enough foliage to...
Yeah, you're in a very dense part of the forest. Yep.
Okay.
So you can see up ahead, kind of shining through the leaves, this sort of pulsing bluish-white glow that gets dimmer with every pulse. And so you start brachiating through the branches and swinging from tree to tree as you can, occasionally dropping down to the ground, and you come upon a clearing. And in the center of this clearing, kind of stumbling near to one of the trees, is a figure unlike any you've ever seen before. He's very tall. He's not human. He's certainly not one of the Fae. Or maybe he is. There's something about him that seems very familiar, even if you don't immediately recognize his form. He has great pointed ears, and his skin is covered in these thick stone-like knobs. And he's wearing what would almost look like a toga, but made out of an animal skin, tossed over his shoulder. And you can see that there's like writing on the hide. And he's looking around, and he's sort of muttering to himself. and I think he might take off some spectacles and nervously clean the lenses off. And he kind of counts on his fingers a little bit, and he starts trying to trace lines through the air. Seems very confused, but you're still a little shook from that dream, so you're not interested in taking any chances. So you creep up behind him and get him at sword point. Tap your sword right under his chin, and he turns around and he starts babbling at you. He's speaking common, which you have learned well enough, but you're really not sure. He doesn't seem to be any kind of threat. That's nice. And you get the feeling that there is some sort of familiarity there with him.
What are
Hello?
you doing here?
I do not know what I am doing here. I was just in Bibia, and now I believe I am in the Shadow Realm, correct?
You have found yourself here. You did not intend to come?
No, I did not. I just followed the ley line, the Shadow Road. It called to me to bring me here. It's
That's very
I hear
strange.
it like music. Yes, I hear it like music, and sometimes things. But that's a whole different story. But I'm supposed to be at Bimia, and now I am here, and you have a very strange Shadow Road here. It sounds like a noble, which the other I'm used to the ones that sound like timpani and also like a cello sometimes. But it is a little bit strange. I just keep going on.
Kari just
it looks like he is not anywhere near stopping.
stopping. Yeah. You have many words.
Yes, I do. But it is because I do not think I want to stay here very long. And he sort of looks at her and brings his glasses down and sees the horns and looks like that. You are a Shadow Fae, yes? You are from here.
I sheathe my sword, coming to the assumption that this creature is no threat to me. Yes,
Yeah,
I am
doesn't seem
native
like
to
it.
this realm. No, he's just a little cutie.
Although, Kari, now that you're up close, you take a look at that hide he's wearing. What kind of hide is it, by the way? What creature? Did you remember? Did you pick that?
I didn't come up with one specifically from the manual because
Fine.
something from the Ghost Light Forest, a large, probably herbivore, buffalo-esque. I don't know what that would be out of Midgard or something.
No real buffalo in a forest, but maybe something like maybe a boar skin.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that it being big enough to literally go all the way up one side and down the other side of him, it's going to need to be.
So it looks like he's wearing a boar skin, a little different, not quite the same as the boar you're used to seeing here. It's much brighter, which is a little strange. It must be a Midgard boar. But you definitely notice the lines drawn all over his map, and you recognize a few of them as marking shadow roads.
How did you come across this skill?
And I look down and see that she's looking at us. Ah, yes. That is what I study. It is what I apparently it was something I was born to do. If this is in fact the Shadow Realm, I was wondering. I know a little of things down here. The City of Lanterns. Do you know where that is? Is that somewhere close by?
We are relatively close. You will need a guide.
Distance is always iffy in the Shadow Realm, but this time of year, it shouldn't be too hard.
No, that's why I just say we're close.
Yeah, more or less. Get estimates.
We can approach that destination.
But that would be my best bet, probably, to get away out of here, because the Shadow Road, it goes out of here. Perhaps that is the oboe sound? Is it that? He kind of listens. You were saying I could hear it off in the distance. Is it that the way, perhaps?
He points roughly towards the City of Lanterns, yes.
Yes. You have a very good intuition about you.
Well, perhaps you were saying it. Yes, I would probably need a guide if you would be willing to help me, and that would be a nice
I won't
thing.
take you. Varus will take you. I point down to my cat, who I will have come friendly, kind of clump. Like, look at him do the whole cat jump up thing, wanting to be pet.
So a little black cat comes up and starts to claw at your pant leg, and his eyes creepily glow with this sort of inner blue, cold light.
I pick him up. I figure he probably can fit in my whole hand, and just like,
oh yeah, he's very light, and it looks like when you study the edges of his fur, it almost looks like it's made of darkness, just sort of woven around him.
Fanta
well,
black
aren't you
cat.
just the most extraordinary thing. Huh.
All right, and I think that's probably a good time for us to stop, and we will pick up bringing everyone together next time.
Awesome.
Episode 1. Thank you very much, everyone. That was a blast. So a little bit of a bouncing around. I hope you guys don't mind getting some background exposition
That was
and
great.
sort of laying that out for everybody, and then so we'll bring it all together and we'll flash back to where you guys are down on the cartways. So
That's awesome.
That was awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you guys for watching as well. Hopefully you guys.
Tell his mom.
I know, so many moms.
That was
fucking story?
I was legit tearing up.
Yeah.
I was tearing up,
Broken,
and
man.
I
That
was
was
like, I wrote this backstory.
Yeah. So, like I said, I hope you don't mind that I took some liberty with a few of the specific details.
I love it.
I thought it was great.
It was
Awesome.
great.
And holy shit, Midgard. Guys, if you haven't checked out the Midgard campaign saying the Hero's Handbook, go over to koboldpress.com, check it out. You get PDFs over there as well as these beautiful little hardback books they've got. And holy shit, will you guys have a good time if you check that out.
So I'll just throw out there too, if anybody watching has any questions about Midgard, my Twitter handle up there is at Dan_Dylan_1. Hit me up. I'm always game to talk D&D. Love to talk Midgard. Got any questions? Want to know anything? Want to poke me about what happened in some of the backstories? I'd love to talk about
I don't think anybody should get to level unless they spoke in character. I'm just saying.
Everybody spoke in character.
Josh didn't
except for
speak
Josh, I don't
once
think he
the
did.
entire show in
He
character.
totally did. He
spoke,
called
never spoke in character.
Ryoden's name.
Oh,
Yeah, he did.
No, I didn't. No.
he never spoke
He's
once.
tormenting us in chat that he hadn't spoken.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. I misunderstood a little bit. All right.
No, yeah.
That's cool.
But that was fun.
Strong
And
silent type.
yeah, if you missed any of the episode, it'll be up on YouTube, probably even in 48, maybe 24 hours. And of course, if you didn't know, it's going to be a podcast as well. So there will be a link to the podcast within the next 10 days. Each episode will be up on podcast format, so you can listen back to the show on your favorite bits on your commute to and from work, lunch break, whatever. So that would be pretty awesome. If you guys enjoyed tonight's show, be sure to hit the follow button and join us. We're here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern for the World Tree Burns. We'd love to see you guys back again next week to continue on our adventure. And another big thank you to Kobold Press for sponsoring the show and letting us play in this awesome, fun world. Of course, other thank yous go to Fantasy Grounds along with Wayland Games for also supporting and sponsoring the show. It's been a lot of fun. We went on for about an hour longer than we initially expected, which is how you can tell that we had a good time playing D&D.
My apologies for running over, but it felt like everybody was into it, so I'm glad. We'll try to keep it. We'll try to keep it in bounds from now on. But that was too good to just leave off.
Invested.
I want to hear everyone's backstory. That's what I was like really invested. I was like, let's keep going. I need to hear this. Like,
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
I
that gives you at least
and I got scared. I was like,
That
I don't
gives you
wanna
at least
do
the
my
gist of what
backstory
everybody's
anymore.
all about. And, yep.
Absolutely. Thank
Some
you
of
guys for
us-
following as well. Go ahead then.
No, I was gonna say some of us still have a lot of secrets, pain, because some of us have centuries worth of backstory. But whatever.
Yeah.
Imagine
We're gonna
that.
get through it
Josh.
next week.
can't believe
Josh with
it.
weird
Let me
secrets.
put on my shocked face.
Wow.
This was a blast, guys. So this really is the first. Like I've done one-offs and I've done playtest, but this is the first campaign session of Midgard that I've gotten to run, and I've been so excited to do it. And I love that you guys brought me on to do this. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you,
I
Dan.
love like talking to Dan, like when we were doing character creation, like we were just like, I'm gonna play this, and Dan's like, I wrote that, and we were just like,
Yeah,
it's
you guys
awesome.
are- you guys
There
are
is
gonna give
nothing
me a
cooler than
big
literally
kick.
having the person that wrote the book be your DM. Like that's
Geeking out.
Yeah.
I'm geeking out hard.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. And thanks for all the subs and the donations as well tonight. You guys have been awesome, and the viewer decision as well was a lot of fun. So thank you guys.
And don't
for
worry,
that.
I've written down the viewer decision stuff. We're not going to forget it. It's going to happen. There's going to be a celestial labradoodle named Puff.
Amazing. Yes, Sips, it's every Tuesday night after the Long March. The full schedule is here. But let's go around the cast and crew to wrap this thing up. Let's figure out where we can find you guys online. Did you enjoy yourself as well? So let's start with our illustrious Dungeon Master, Dan. What do you think of tonight's show, and where can we find you online, Dan?
Oh man, I thought you guys were awesome. I've been more and more excited as we dig into character stuff coming up to this, and you did not disappoint. It's better than I could have hoped, and I love how the backstory's laid out, and I love how they're going to weave together next time. I hope that's going to land as well. I cannot wait. I love it. I had a blast. So you can find me on Twitter at Dan_Dylan_1. I'm also on Facebook. I'm a moderator on the massive 120,000 member in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Facebook group. So if you want to talk D&D, that's a great place to do it. I'll be writing more stuff for Kobold Press. I'll be writing stuff for the Adventurers League, and I even got to contribute to an official WotC product that hasn't been announced yet that I can't talk about, but maybe pay attention to the stream of many eyes.
Great
Oh.
stuff. Thank you, Dan.
Oh.
Again, awesome job. Tool School, same questions.
Oh, I had a blast. I mean, I was geeking out so much hearing about all the different places that I've been reading about in the World Book and things that I have, just all of it. It's way, way, way cool. I am super excited. You can find me all over social media as Tall Squall. If you go to my Twitter at Tall Squall, you can find links to all the other stuff I'm in, but absolute blast. I cannot wait to play in this world and to play with all of you guys. And Loken, man, you're killing us. You're killing us. It was beautiful.
I'm sorry.
It was so good. Oh no, it was just
No, it was
great.
good.
I love it. I mean,
That landed so well.
yeah, awesome work, everybody. No, it was great hearing everyone's backstories. I was gonna say, I think I'm the innocent one of the group. Imagine that. Anyway, can't wait.
Let me put on my shocked face.
Wow.
Fine.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tool School. Tia.
Hi, I am Laurelania Maitia Zimmer on Twitter. Those are some links. Hopefully they're not broken or misspelled, because I have been doing D&D for like nearly 12 hours today, and it has been awesome. For
That's a
my
good
own
thing.
prep for Midgard here, back to the Long March, back to here again. This is something that I've been looking forward to since I started reading it. I'm kind of set in my ways with D&D, and I didn't think that I would ever get pulled into another campaign setting again for a very, very long time. But the lore, oh my god, it's like Dungeons and Drugs is more like it, because that's what Midgard is it's a freaking drug. The fact that I got to actually see the Lord, I didn't see the Lord of the Hunt curveball that you threw there, because my backstory didn't initially include that. So actually seeing the god is a really, really cool and empowering experience. And playing a character that is not evil and more attuned with nature is definitely new for me. So exploring that with you guys. And again, McLaughlin, happy birthday. And your mom, dude.
Happy
why?
birthday! Sorry I killed your parents.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I'm good. That's me. I love you.
Amazing. Thank you, Tia. And yes, McLaughlin.
Hello, my name's Mick Loken. You guys can find me on my Twitch channel. I do my own D&D show, which starts tomorrow, which will be for podcast listeners. That's May 23rd. We're starting season 2 of Chosen, which is a 5e Final Fantasy hybrid I homebrewed. So I'm super excited about that one. I'll be beginning at 7 p.m. Central. I'm on a slew of other shows. If you follow me on Twitter at McLoken, you guys can totally come check me out. I tweet about what show I'm going to be on and all that kind of stuff. And I'll be starting a second show of City of Mist on Mondays. Monday nights with a bunch of fantastic casts there too that I'll also be running. So I like making up stuff on the fly. So it's a fantastic time. I apologize if I made everyone cry. I got teary-eyed playing that character because I just pictured a little gnome with big eyes and like tearing up, and I was like, no, my heart's luckily
It's the saddest thing, dude.
I had to
you.
channel my
Happy
sad
birthday.
voice.
And the tears.
Oh, thank
that
you.
was doing it, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
the voice. Oh,
Yep.
dude, your voice is so good for it.
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic, guys. Thank you for having me on the show. This was fantastic. I love everyone's backstory. Dan, thank you for being a fantastic DM. That was fucking
Thank
amazing.
you very much for saying so. My pleasure.
Yeah. Everyone's an amazing character, and I can't wait to see where this show goes. So yeah.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you, McLoken. And Josh.
You're muted. You're muted.
He's just role-playing Kane, I think.
Yeah.
Muted. Still muted. Still muted. Still
Jerk.
muted.
Jerk.
Oh,
He's doing it on purpose now. Oh, you're such
Can we ad lib for him?
My name is
Just keep
Kevin.
talking.
Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm going to betray the party. Hi there, mates. My name's Josh, and I'm going to betray the party. Let me do my worst English accent I can possibly manage.
Skipped right into
Smorgasbord.
He's Encounter Josh, and you can find him here on Encounter Josh on Twitch. You can also find him Encounter Josh on Twitter. Goodbye, everybody. Don't roll too many nat ones, because we want to be laughing there when you do. Good night.
Nailed it. Yeah. Only other things are tomorrow we're live. 1 p.m. Eastern is Call of Cthulhu, Doors to Darkness, followed by Warhammer Beneath Dark Bowels of Jim Davis in the DMC, and then Star Wars Rise of the Dark Side with Strider Heap in the DMC. So we've got 9 hours of Call of Cthulhu, Warhammer, and D&D tomorrow. So tune in. Starts 1 p.m. Eastern, goes out all the way throughout the day. So join us again then. Make sure you follow to catch the shows. Here's the YouTube link again in case you want to watch that. And here's all the social media for Encounter Roleplay.
Before we break, real quick, Will, can you drop the name of the artist who did this for our game?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, there should be there's a link on the site, but I'll drop one for you guys here. To Sketch Fair, Kim Van Duen did all of the artwork for the character portraits. So I'll chuck up on the screen for you guys.
I've been making people jealous at work, showing people. I was like, oh, this is the character I'll be playing in this campaign. And they also play D&D, and they're like, motherfucker. Goddamn.
I'm running a campaign
some
with
art right
character
there.
art. That's so awesome.
Yeah, they Kim does such an amazing job. We thank Kim for all the amazing artwork on the show. And some of the other bits on the trailer are actually official Kobold Press artwork as well, in case someone's wondering.
Oh, the trailer was so money. I was not
Great job on that,
expecting
Will.
Holy
Yeah,
shit.
that was pretty.
I was
That was
like,
pretty fucking on point.
Did you make that, Will?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh.
Finishing
Knocked it out of the park, sir.
Today.
Oh, he's back.
Oh, hello. So yeah, but that's all from me. So thank you guys for watching. It's been an awesome night, and we'll see you again next week, 8 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday for the World Tree Burns. Until next time, try not to roll too many nat ones. We want to be laughing when you do. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
One word, Josh. Just one.